The conference room of Nexus Biotech felt smaller than usual that morning. Maybe it was the tension crackling through the air, or maybe it was just the weight of what I knew was coming. I sat at my usual place, watching my brother Michael strut around like he already owned the place. He'd even brought an entourage, 2 lawyers in expensive suits and our father, looking proud as always when it came to his golden boy. Emma, Michael's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Thanks for gathering everyone on such short notice. I nodded slightly, glancing around at my board members' confused faces. These were people who'd believed in my vision 5 years ago when Nexus was just an idea sketched on coffee-stained napkins. Now we were on the verge of revolutionizing cancer treatment with our patented nanotech delivery system. And my brother had come to steal it all. As you all know, Michael continued, straightening his Italian silk tie, Vertex Pharmaceuticals has been looking to acquire promising biotech startups. What you don't know is that I've been named their new director of acquisitions. My stomach tightened. So that's how he was playing this. I've reviewed Nexus's financials. He gestured to one of his lawyers, who began distributing folders. While the research is interesting, the company needs serious capital to move forward. Capital that only Vertex can provide. Dr. Sarah Martinez, my head of research, spoke up. We're actually quite close to phase AUV trials. Yes, Michael waved her off. But let's be realistic. Emma's little startup needs adult supervision now. I didn't react to the condescension in his voice. I'd heard it all my life. When I chose molecular biology over business school. When I spent my inheritance on lab equipment instead of a downtown condo. When I missed his wedding because I was finalizing our first successful trial. The offer is generous. His lawyer stepped forward. Vertex will absorb all current staff and research. Emma will receive a comfortable consulting position, of course. Of course, I echoed softly. Michael's smile widened. Your little startup is mine now, sis. But don't worry, I'll take good care of your science project. I watched his lawyer open the ownership documents with a flourish. The room went silent as they began reviewing the papers. Then the silence changed, deepened. Michael's smile faltered. There must be some mistake. Is there? I asked, speaking for the first time. These patents. His lawyer shuffled through the papers frantically. They're all registered to Emma Thorne. Personally, I finished for him. Not to Nexus Biotech. To me. The room erupted in whispers. Michael's face turned red. That's impossible. The company licenses the patents from me. I cut in smoothly. A detail you might have noticed if you'd done proper due diligence instead of assuming your little sister was too naive to protect herself. I stood up, smoothing my simple black dress. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every piece of intellectual property that makes our delivery system revolutionary. I own them. Personally, the agreement was filed with the patent office 3 years ago. Dad, Michael turned to our father, who had been unusually quiet. Did you know about this? Dad looked older suddenly and strangely uncertain. I never checked. You said you had reviewed everything. Oh, he reviewed what he wanted to see, I said calmly, picking up my tablet. Just like he always has. But while you were both busy underestimating me, I was busy building safeguards. I turned to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, given this attempted hostile takeover, I move to suspend this meeting. We'll reconvene once our legal team has reviewed Mr. Thorne's proposal. The board members nodded, gathering their things quickly. They'd seen enough corporate drama to know when to make a strategic exit. You can't do this. Michael's voice cracked slightly. Vertex has already announced the acquisition to major shareholders. Actually, I smiled properly for the first time that day. I can. And I did. But please, feel free to explain to Vertex how you failed to verify patent ownership before attempting to seize control of $1 billion technology. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Michael? That consulting position you so generously offered me. I turned back to face him. I declined. The sound of his expensive briefcase hitting the floor followed me out into the hallway. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Martinez. That was magnificent. But what now? Now, I typed back. Now we show them exactly what they tried to steal. Because while Michael had been playing corporate games, I'd been changing the world. And I was just getting started. I stepped into my private lab, the real heart of Nexus Biotech, the place where I'd spent countless nights developing the technology they thought they could simply take. On the main screen, our latest trial results glowed with promise. Results that would revolutionize cancer treatment. Results that belonged to me. My phone buzzed again. Dad, this time. We need to talk. I let it go to voicemail. They'd had years to talk, to listen, to understand what I was building. Now they could wait while I finished what I'd started. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room isn't quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they're too busy changing the world to waste words on those who never bothered to listen. And I had a world to change. The next morning, Vertex Pharmaceuticals stock opened down 15%. Headlines screamed about the failed acquisition and undisclosed patent complications. I watched the chaos unfold from my lab while reviewing our latest trial data. Dr. Thorne, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your father is here again. And there's something else. What is it, Julia? The NIA just called. They want to fast-track our approval process. Apparently, someone sent them our complete trial results. I smiled, thinking of the encrypted files I transmitted last night. How interesting. Tell Dad I'll give him 10 minutes. He looked smaller somehow, standing in my lab. The great Thomas Thorne, venture capitalist extraordinaire, surrounded by equipment he'd once dismissed as a waste of money. The board of Vertex wants Michael's resignation, he said without preamble. Not my problem. Emma, please. He's your brother. I carefully placed a slide under the microscope. Was he my brother when he tried to steal my company? When he called my life's work a science project? He didn't understand. No, I adjusted the focus, watching cancer cells die in real time. He didn't bother to understand. Neither did you. I admit, I underestimated. Everyone underestimated me, Dad. That was their mistake. I straightened up. Do you know what this is? I gestured to the microscope. He shook his head. This is the future of cancer treatment. Targeted nanoparticles that can deliver medication directly to cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue untouched. 0 side effects. 94% efficacy rate in trials. That's impossible. No, that's science. The science you and Michael were too busy mocking to notice. I pulled up our trial results on the main screen. The NIAK is fast-tracking our approval. Within 6 months, this treatment will be saving lives. My God, he whispered, finally understanding. Emma, your 10 minutes are up. I turned back to my work. Julia will show you out. Wait, he pulled out a folder. Michael asked me to give you this. A new offer from Vertex. Triple the original amount. I took the folder and without opening it, fed it into the lab's paper shredder. Tell Michael he can keep his money. I have something better. I have results. After he left, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Michael, 2 from Mom, and 1 text from Dr. Martinez. Big pharma vultures circling. 5 acquisition offers this morning. I typed back, decline them all. We're staying independent. Because independence was what I'd fought for all along. The freedom to pursue my research my way without corporate interference or family politics. My phone rang again, an unknown number. The voice on the other end was familiar. Dr. Thorne? This is Dr. Sandra Collins from the NIH Review Board. We've examined your trial data. It's revolutionary. Thank you. We'd like to put you on the fast-track program. Your treatment could be approved by year's end. I looked at the microscope screen, at the cancer cells being systematically destroyed by my nanoparticles. That would be acceptable. There's something else. She paused. The Nobel Committee has requested your complete research documentation. I sat down slowly. The Nobel Prize. The ultimate validation. I'll have everything sent over today. After hanging up, I walked to the window of my lab. From here, I could see the Vertex Pharmaceuticals building where Michael was probably cleaning out his office. In the reflection, I caught sight of myself. Not the quiet little sister anymore, but Dr. Emma Thorne, revolutionary scientist. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. You've ruined me. Happy now? I typed back. I didn't ruin you. Your arrogance did that. But don't worry. When we cure cancer, I'll make sure you get a discount. Because sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And I was about to prove something that would change the world. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the National Institutes of Health press conference. Camera flashes erupted as I announced the FDA's approval of our treatment. Behind me, a screen showed real-time imaging of our nanoparticles destroying cancer cells. This isn't just a treatment, I concluded. This is a revolution in oncology, and it's only the beginning. The questions came rapid fire. Dr. Thorne, how does it feel to be the youngest scientist nominated for the Nobel Prize in Medicine? Will Nexus Biotech remain independent? Any response to Vertex Pharmaceuticals' recent bankruptcy filing? I handled each one with calm precision, just as I'd handled every challenge in my lab. But the last question made me pause. Dr. Thorne, your brother Michael Thorne was recently quoted saying this technology was stolen from him. Any comment? I smiled slightly. The patent office records speak for themselves. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients waiting. Back in my office, Dr. Martinez was waiting with our latest results. The survival rate is holding at 96%. It's unprecedented. Good. I reviewed the data. Start preparing the documentation for our next project. Already done. She hesitated. Your mother's here. I looked up. Where? Reception. She's been there all morning, watching the press conference on TV. I sighed. Send her in. Mom hadn't changed much. Still elegant. Still perfectly put together. But something was different in her eyes as she looked around my office at the awards, the patents, the evidence of everything she'd missed. I saw you on TV, she said softly. You were amazing. Thank you. Michael's not doing well. I know. Dad's trying to arrange a position for him at one of his portfolio companies. She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. He never meant to. Yes, he did. I cut her off gently. He meant to take everything I'd built because he never believed I could build anything worthwhile. You all did. We were wrong. She reached into her bag. I brought something from when you were little. It was a faded photograph. Me at age 7, wearing oversized safety goggles, conducting my first experiment with a chemistry set. You were always different, she said. Always quiet, always thinking. We should have seen. You saw what you wanted to see. I handed the photo back. A quiet girl who needed to be more like her ambitious brother. You never noticed I had my own ambitions. And now? What are your ambitions now that you've proved us all wrong? I turned to the window, where construction crews were breaking ground on Nexus Biotech's new research campus. Now, I'm going to cure more diseases, create more breakthroughs, save more lives. Without us? Without interference. I softened slightly. But if you're genuinely interested in understanding my work, the lab tours are on Thursdays. She nodded, understanding the olive branch for what it was. I'll be there. After she left, I went down to my lab, my real home. On my desk was a letter from the Nobel Committee, still unopened. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had something better. Results. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Congratulations. I was wrong. Then Dad, you've changed the world, Emma. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. And finally, Dr. Martinez. Ready to start the next revolution. I smiled, picking up my lab coat. Always. Because success isn't just about patents or prizes or proving people wrong. It's about changing the world while they're busy underestimating you. And I was just getting started. 1 year later, I stood in Stockholm accepting the Nobel Prize in Medicine. My family sat in the audience, not as controllers or critics, but as witnesses to what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. In my acceptance speech, I didn't mention the attempted takeover or the family drama. Instead, I talked about the patients, thousands now, living cancer-free because of our treatment. I talked about the next horizons in medical science, and I talked about the power of quiet determination. Sometimes, I concluded, the biggest breakthroughs come from the people you least expect. The ones working silently while others are talking. The ones changing the world while others are planning to take it. Later that night, in my lab in Stockholm, I looked at my reflection in the window. Nobel laureate, CEO, scientist, the quiet girl who changed the world. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from a young researcher in our lab. Dr. Thorne, I think we found something in the Alzheimer's trials. I smiled, putting on my lab coat, because this was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving what's possible when you stop listening to those who doubt you and start listening to the quiet voice that says discover, create, revolutionize. And I was still listening.
I happened to overhear it by accident. One evening, as I returned home, I stopped in my tracks when I heard a low voice coming from the living room. That day we were preparing for a Christmas party with my husband's family. I had just come back from picking basil from the garden when I heard that low voice coming from the living room. It was my husband's voice. Normally calm and gentle, his voice sounded cold and ruthless at that moment. I can't believe I married that ugly woman. When I heard those words through the wall, I felt as if my heart had frozen. The ugly woman my husband was referring to was none other than me. But who on earth was he saying such cruel things to? Peeking through the gap in the door with trepidation, I saw something that made me doubt my eyes. Sitting across from my husband and nodding along was his sister, Catherine. The two of them continued their conversation, completely unaware of my presence. Catherine swirled her wine glass and whispered coldly to him, "You should divorce her before you have kids." My husband nodded and replied, Oh, of course. But only after we get her family to buy us a vacation home. Catherine and him insulted me and discussed their future plans as if I had never existed. Suddenly, everything went dark before my eyes, and my legs gave way. I couldn't believe it. My beloved husband and my dear sister-in-law were having such a conversation behind my back. I stifled my sobs and left the scene with trembling hands. My chest felt like it would burst and I could barely breathe. The conversation was replayed over and over in my head as I ran dazed out of the house. I met my husband 3 years ago through a friend's introduction. I was drawn to his sincerity and kindness, and after dating, we got married. At the time, I was truly happy from the bottom of my heart. He had just started his own business, and although his income was unstable, I wanted to support him. After our marriage, I worked full-time and covered most of our living expenses while quietly supporting his business. It was all out of love. His dreams coming true was my own happiness. As for Catherine, I had always believed we had a good relationship. She is 5 years older than my husband and already has her own family. To me, she was like a real sister, and even after marriage, I thought we had built a good family relationship where I could often turn to her for advice. I also remembered my parents. When we got married, my parents offered financial support. I don't mean to boast, but compared to others, my parents are undoubtedly financially well off. They helped us in many ways, including paying the down payment for our new home and thinking of our future. I even remember them joking once, "One day, we'll give you two a beautiful vacation home." I laughed it off saying, "Oh, that's too much." But my husband replied with a tone that was hard to tell if serious or joking, "Well, if that day comes, I'd be grateful." Never did I imagine that he had taken it seriously and was acting with my family's wealth as his target. The moment I overheard the conversation between my husband and Catherine, something inside me crumbled. My beloved husband and the sister-in-law I trusted, the two people I valued most in my life, hurled words of insult and betrayal at me. No tears came, but I couldn't stop shaking. I ran outside and collapsed at the front door, unable to stand. Words like ugly woman and should divorce her swirled around in my head. What shocked me most was that the voice insulting my appearance was my husband's. It's true, I'm not a glamorous beauty like Catherine. But I believed my husband when he said he loved me, including who I was inside. To think that deep down, he was calling me that ugly woman. The sorrow and frustration nearly tore my heart apart. After a while, I somehow managed to stand and wiped away my tears. I had the urge to rush back inside and confront the two of them in a fit of emotion, but I stopped myself at the last moment. I instinctively felt that if I let my emotions take over and accuse them without proof, they would make excuses and manipulate the situation. I don't clearly remember what happened afterward, but I finished the Christmas party as if nothing had happened. Most of the preparations were already done, so I just chatted with the family like usual and went home. My husband went to his night shift job, so I was alone that night when I returned. I won't just sit by and let myself be betrayed like this. Muttering in a hoarse voice, I wiped my tear-stained cheeks with my sleeve. Even on the edge of despair, a quiet determination began to grow inside me. Over the next month, I kept up the appearance of normalcy while quietly taking action behind the scenes. First, I organized the voice recording I had secretly taken that day as solid evidence of their conversation. Next, I checked the balance of our joint account. My bad feeling was right there were large withdrawals I didn't recognize in the passbook. The dates were just the previous week. The amount taken out totaled $10,000. Of course, I had no idea about it. It was clear that my husband had moved money without my permission. But for what purpose? The word vacation home flashed through my mind. Perhaps the plan for my parents to buy us a vacation home had begun to take shape without my knowledge, and my husband had jumped the gun and prepared a down payment. Or maybe he simply transferred it to a secret savings account under his own name. Either way, This was proof that my husband had begun to betray me financially as well. After that, I began observing my husband's schedule very carefully. To start with, I searched his smartphone and laptop for any possible clues. Fortunately, my husband was not tech-savvy, and his accounts on the shared laptop were still logged in automatically. With trembling fingers, I opened his email inbox and found several suspicious exchanges. The sender was Catherine, and while the subject lines were disguised as work-related matters, the content clearly contained insults toward me and references to things they were doing behind the family's back. I'll casually mention next week's thing to her. The rest is up to you. When I read that message, the screen blurred with rage. From other undeleted fragments, I could also tell that my husband had been speaking ill of me to Catherine. Apparently, once a week, he went out under the pretext of a business meeting, and each time, he and Catherine were scheming something together. I carefully took screenshots of each message and backed them up to a separate USB drive. Just in case, I also photographed the key emails and messages with my phone. Next, I tracked the movement of the money that had been withdrawn from our joint account. Through online banking statements, I found out that the $10,000 had been transferred to a personal account under my husband's name. He was likely trying to secure funds for himself in preparation for a divorce. Grinding my teeth at his cowardice, I still remained calm and kept documenting everything. Alongside gathering evidence, I decided to consult a trustworthy lawyer. Emotionally devastated by the sudden betrayal, I felt I needed professional guidance. Through a referral, I visited a law office and told the attorney everything that had happened. My voice trembled with tears as I laid out all the evidence I had collected on the table. The lawyer listened with a solemn expression and nodded. Then he said, "You have a solid case. Let's prepare thoroughly." Those words were a huge relief to me. From a legal standpoint, I could sue my husband for verbal abuse and financial misconduct. And we needed to find out why he was so close with Catherine in the first place. I nodded silently and began discussing the strategy with the lawyer. Based on his advice, the first thing I did was protect my assets. To prevent my husband from withdrawing any more of my money, I transferred all remaining funds from the joint account into one under my name. I left just enough money in the joint account to avoid raising suspicion and prepared an excuse like, I moved it to a fixed deposit for investment. In addition, I organized records of our income and expenses during our marriage, including proof that my funds were used for his business, such as bank transfers and receipts in case we ended up in divorce mediation or court. To my surprise, I was calm and methodical as I moved forward with preparing for separation. I didn't even have time to heal my broken heart, but doing anything helped me stay mentally stable more than wallowing in grief. And the most important step was contacting Catherine's husband, my brother-in-law. Catherine had been married for 10 years. Her husband was someone I had interacted with many times at family gatherings, and he had always been a calm and gentle man. I gathered my courage and called him, asking to meet in person. He must have sensed something from the tone of my voice, because he readily agreed to make time. In a quiet voice, I began, "I need to talk to you about Catherine and my husband." He looked surprised but seemed to realize from my serious expression that it was no ordinary matter. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and showed him some of the evidence I had prepared: transcripts of conversations between my husband and Catherine, overlapping outing records on suspicious dates, and messages insulting me. By the time he finished looking through everything, his face had turned pale and was soon distorted by anger and sorrow. "I can't believe my wife would do something like this," he muttered, barely audible. I could only nod through my tears. According to him, Catherine had been acting distant lately, and things had been tense between them. But he had never imagined that such disgraceful behavior was happening behind his back. Then came a shocking revelation from him. It turned out that my husband and Catherine were not biological siblings. Catherine was actually the daughter of my father-in-law's elder brother. Her birth parents had died in a traffic accident when she was 2 years old, and since my in-laws had no children at the time, they took her in and raised her. I can't forgive this. We can't let those two get away with betraying us, my brother-in-law said with quiet determination. I looked up, startled. His eyes burned with anger and an even stronger resolve. And so, the two of us made a solemn vow to confront the traitors together and make them understand the weight of what they had done. The evidence was complete. The preparations were in place. I decided that the final act would be to reveal the truth in front of the entire family. I wanted to expose their shameful actions, which they had hidden for so long, under the light of day. On the surface, it was presented as a birthday celebration for my father. But in reality, it was the perfect opportunity to gather both sides of the family under the name of a family reunion. My brother-in-law agreed to fully cooperate, and the plan progressed smoothly. First, I suggested to my husband, "How about we have a dinner with everyone sometime soon?" Since we hadn't had a gathering in a while, I proposed inviting both families for a celebration. He looked surprised for a moment but replied, "That sounds like a great idea," looking rather pleased. I contacted Catherine myself and, of course, asked her husband to attend as well. Catherine responded without suspicion, saying, "I'm looking forward to it." She must have had no idea that her actions would be exposed. On the day of the dinner, we reserved a private room at a quiet restaurant in the city. My husband and me, my parents, Catherine and her husband, and my husband's parents were all present. It had been a while since the whole family was together, and a pleasant atmosphere filled the room as we raised our glasses for a toast. I smiled politely, though I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My husband and Catherine showed no signs of nervousness and were even happily chatting. Seeing Catherine laughing and raising her glass beside my husband made my blood boil, but I held it in. After the main course was finished and just before dessert was served, I quietly stood up from my seat. "May I have a moment to say something?" Everyone at the table turned their eyes to me in surprise. My husband gave me a puzzled look and laughed. "What's this all of a sudden?" I looked him straight in the eye. In that moment, all fear and sadness vanished, leaving only firm resolve within me. Today is meant to be my dad's birthday celebration, but there's something else I need to tell you all. As I began speaking slowly, everyone looked confused. Only my husband furrowed his brows slightly, as if sensing something bad. Catherine, sitting next to him, tilted her head and smiled. "What's this about?" I took a deep breath and looked down at the table. "It's about you and my husband, Catherine." Silence fell over the room. My husband blurted out, "Huh?" in a foolish tone, while Catherine visibly paled and looked shaken. Despite my pounding heart, I continued to speak as calmly as I could. "I happened to overhear a conversation between the two of them recently." Saying this, I pulled out the notes I had taken from that day's conversation. My husband tried to reach for them, but my brother-in-law quickly grabbed his shoulder and said in a low voice, "Let her finish speaking." My husband's face was drained of color. Without hesitation, I opened the memo and read it out loud in a clear voice. As I finished reading, my mother let out a faint gasp from across the table. My father glared at my husband and Catherine with a furious expression. My husband's parents looked bewildered, staring at their son as if he were a stranger. As for the guilty parties themselves, my husband was sweating profusely, speechless, and Catherine's voice trembled as she muttered, "It's not like that, this is." With trembling hands, I pulled out my next trump card. It was the printed records of their messages and emails. "There's more. Please take a look at these." I quietly laid them out on the table and handed copies to my parents and my husband's parents. My brother-in-law stood up and spoke to Catherine in a calm but stern voice. "What the hell is this?" There was a hint of anger in his tone. Catherine flushed red and lowered her head, unable to respond. My mother scanned the email text with trembling hands, then broke down in tears. "How could you, really?" Beside her, My father supported her shoulder and, with barely suppressed fury, asked Catherine, "Is this true?" "Both of you, answer me." Pressed by my father, Catherine only shook her head and cried. But the emails were undeniable proof. There was no escaping it. Meanwhile, my husband desperately tried to make excuses. "It's a misunderstanding, it was just a joke," he murmured in a feeble voice. But I confronted him with a firm tone. Was calling me an ugly woman and planning to divorce me for my family's money also a joke? My husband was at a loss for words and looked around aimlessly. I continued, "You secretly withdrew money from our joint account. That fact is clearly shown in the passbook." With that, I presented copies of the bank transaction records I had prepared beforehand for everyone to see. "How exactly were you planning to use that $10,000 you took without permission? Care to explain?" When I pressed him, my husband's face flushed red as he shouted, "It's because you backed me into a corner. I just wanted to live with someone I truly loved." Everyone in the room was stunned by his sudden outburst. He roughly pulled back his chair and stood up, yelling at the top of his lungs, "Yeah, that's right. I was planning to divorce you. I've had enough of your ugly face. I only married you for your family's money from the start." Driven by rage and desperation, he revealed his true self in a flurry of shouting. Then he pointed at my brother-in-law and shouted again, "Your wife too. She knew everything and still went along with it." So what? As my husband approached my brother-in-law in a frenzy, the latter stood up quietly. His fists were clenched tightly, trembling with anger. His eyes were filled with both fury and disappointment. But he took a deep breath and spoke in a cold, dismissive tone. "You are despicable." That single sentence pushed my husband over the edge, and he lunged forward to strike. But in the next instant, my father and my husband's father each grabbed one of his arms and stopped him. "That's enough." My husband's father shouted, and my husband seemed to snap out of it and fell silent. What followed was a scene of utter chaos. My mother broke down in tears. My husband's mother stood frozen in shock. Catherine sat pale-faced, unable to say a word. With trembling shoulders, my father turned to her and roared, "You're just as disgraceful. I can't believe you behaved like that with your so-called brother." Then he turned to my husband and shouted, "Get out of our sight right now." My husband stood still, dazed for a moment, then eventually slumped his shoulders and muttered in a barely audible voice, "I'm sorry." With those final words, he fled the private room of the restaurant. Catherine, with tears streaming down her face, could only repeat, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." My brother-in-law didn't even glance at her. He simply said, "We need to talk when we get home," before calling the staff and silently paying the bill. And thus, after a long and hostile silence, the dinner ended in the worst possible way. Several days after the dinner, I began the official divorce proceedings with my lawyer. Since that day, both my husband and Catherine had been left completely isolated. First, about my husband after storming out of the restaurant, he tried to contact me several times. He called and emailed, begging for forgiveness, claiming it was a moment of weakness. But I had no intention of entertaining him. The total number of calls and emails reached 85. I told him, through my lawyer, that any further communication must go through legal channels. Since then, I haven't seen him in person. Later, his parents contacted me separately and offered a heartfelt apology for their son's behavior. They were not at fault, so I simply replied, "I appreciate the sentiment." In the divorce negotiations, I demanded the return of the $10,000 he had withdrawn without my consent. Although my husband initially resisted the conditions presented through the lawyer, we had undeniable evidence. Eventually, he admitted full responsibility and agreed to return the money. The final settlement also included a fair amount to cover my contributions to our living expenses and the support I had given to his business. While the financial settlement mattered, What was most important to me was never having to see him again and ending things properly. As for Catherine and her husband, their situation also sent shockwaves through the family. I heard that my brother-in-law sat down with Catherine as soon as they got home that day. Or rather, it was more of a confrontation than a discussion. A few days later, he filed for divorce. Even after 10 years of marriage, once trust is lost, there's no way to restore the bond. Catherine reportedly cried and begged him to stay, but he was resolute. He told her he wanted no property division or alimony and ordered her to leave the house. Naturally, their parents were furious and refused to let her set foot in their home again. My mother-in-law told her, "Take some time to cool your head," and pushed her away. Betraying her family and tearing apart 3 households, her actions were unforgivable. So what became of them after they got isolated? I officially divorced my husband and returned to my maiden name. I heard through the grapevine that my ex-husband fell into heavy debt from alimony payments and failed business ventures. After our divorce, he lost all the trust and connections he had through my family, and his business partners started pulling away. He became an outcast in the eyes of those around him and was tormented by loneliness. Shunned by mutual acquaintances and my family, the once confident man had completely faded. In the end, he was abandoned by everyone utterly, and quite literally, alone. Catherine's situation turned out just as miserable. After the divorce, with no one to turn to, she reportedly found it hard to remain at her workplace and eventually resigned. Rumors of her inappropriate remarks spread within the company, leaving her with no place to belong. She couldn't return to her family home, and now she's said to be living a modest life, relying on a friend. In any case, both of them lost their homes and their reputations as a direct result of the humiliation and betrayal they brought upon themselves. As for the vacation home, my parents ultimately purchased it under my name, and after the divorce, I became its manager. My ex-husband, having lost his dreams of a new life, apparently struggled to find a place to live and now resides alone in a cheap apartment. Some time has passed since then. At first, the emotional wounds ran deep, and I would often cry in the middle of the night. But with the support of my family, friends, and my former brother-in-law, someone who has now become a close and understanding ally, I gradually began to smile again. Determined to begin a new life, I threw myself into my work to rebuild myself. Fortunately, my boss and co-workers understood my situation and encouraged me, helping me move forward in my career. At one point, I felt like I had lost everything because of betrayal, but it also gave me the opportunity to realize what truly matters in life. Now, I manage the vacation home and spend weekends there with my parents and close friends. It's a quiet place by a lake where I once imagined sharing dreams of the future with my husband. But now it's different. Here, I have begun to envision new dreams. I replanted the flowers in the spacious garden and renovated the interior to suit my own tastes. I decided everything for myself, not relying on anyone, not clinging to love. Living on my own 2 feet, this strength, born from betrayal, now supports me. Of course, my emotional scars haven't fully healed. The fact that I was betrayed by someone I loved deeply will remain a pain buried in my heart for the rest of my life. Even so, it is only because I endured that pain that I am who I am today. I'm no longer afraid of the words "ugly woman" that my husband once threw at me. I now understand my own beauty and worth in my own way. They were the ones who judged others by appearance and trampled on kindness. And now I believe it is they who truly carried ugliness within themselves. Recently, I received a letter from Catherine. It was filled with words of apology and regret. She expressed deep remorse for what she had done and wrote that if one day she could be forgiven, she would like to rebuild our relationship as family. Honestly, I still cannot bring myself to forgive her. But if time can eventually heal this wound, then perhaps I will be ready to face her again when that day comes. Until then, I want to keep my distance. Meanwhile, I haven't heard a single word from my ex-husband since the divorce was finalized. According to mutual acquaintances, he has left town and now lives quietly somewhere far away. His business failed, his credibility vanished, and there is no sign of the ambition or vitality he once had. I feel no pity or sympathy for him anymore. I only hope that he realizes this is the result of the seeds he sowed. Life is unpredictable. This is a lesson I've learned firsthand. The sorrow of being betrayed by someone you trusted is immeasurable. But I stood back up and began walking a new path. Wait, my mom and the others. They're not here yet. I kept my eyes on the table as I asked the staff. The section reserved for family at our wedding reception remained completely empty. The staff member quickly touched her earpiece and said, "I'll check." She radioed someone immediately. A few seconds later, she nodded slightly and turned to me. "It seems they haven't arrived at the reception yet." She gave a small, apologetic bow before quietly walking away. "You've got to be kidding me." A tight pain clenched in my chest. Today is my wedding day with Jonathan. The most important day of my life. After Jonathan and I got engaged, I spent the whole year preparing while juggling my demanding job. Choosing the dress, visiting venues, designing the invitations, everything was new and overwhelming. Still, my mother said, "I can't wait to see what kind of wedding it'll be." And my brother added, "It'll be the kids' first wedding too. I hope it's something they'll always remember." Their words kept me going. Even on those endless nights in the ICU, I wrote personal messages on each invitation, hoping to make them feel special. I even picked my mother's favorite flower for the table centerpieces. I truly believed everyone in my family was looking forward to it. I believed it with all my heart. And yet, they're not coming? I gripped my phone and started calling. My mother. My brother. No one answered. It felt deliberate, like they were all purposely ignoring our wedding. The joyful sounds of laughter and celebration behind me felt like they belonged to a different world. That's when Jonathan rushed over. "Heather, are you okay?" I pressed my phone against his chest. "My mom and brother, they're not here. Look at the family table." As soon as Jonathan looked over, his expression changed. "Do you think something happened? Any messages?" I shook my head. "Nothing. I've been calling nonstop, but no one's picking up." Back in the dressing room, I sat down slowly and tried to calm myself. Maybe something came up. Worried something might have happened to them. I checked my phone again. Calls, texts, emails, nothing. No messages. No read receipts. Why? They were so excited. Jonathan sat down beside me and gently placed a hand on my back. "Maybe your mom had some kind of travel trouble, flight delays or something." Even if that's true, they would have contacted me. Still gripping my phone, I thought aloud. "I'm going to check Facebook." Facebook? I just have a bad feeling. Mom always posts something, even in times like this. Nervously, I opened the app. The most recent post hit me like a punch. A picture of a bright blue ocean and white sandy beach. My mother was smiling behind oversized sunglasses. My brother's kids splashing in the water with inflatable rings. My brother and his wife laughing under a palm tree, cocktails in hand. Family trip to Hawaii. Best time ever. #family love, healing vacation. My heart froze with an audible crack. This was posted today, right? I showed the screen to Jonathan. He went silent, then muttered bitterly. What the hell? They're in Hawaii? Family trip. On our wedding day? My emotions were so tangled, I couldn't even cry. Jonathan, give me a moment. I stood up and walked out of the room. This had to be a mistake. It had to be. Then, a message came through. It was from my mother. It's just a minor thing. Stop calling me. I nearly stopped breathing. Jonathan quietly stepped behind me. Did you hear from them? I showed him the screen. He stood frozen for a long moment, speechless. She called it a minor thing. Our wedding, I said quietly. I didn't even have the strength to raise my voice. I spent a whole year preparing. She kept saying how excited she was. What kind of dress are you wearing? She asked. My brother said his kids were so excited to be ring bearers. My shoulders trembled. I always believed. I tried so hard to fit in with my family. I did everything I could. But maybe it was all just pretend. That's not true. At least I know how hard you tried. His words were almost enough to save me. But the thorn stuck deep in my heart wouldn't come out. Tell me, what did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. Then why? Why would they do this to me? Did I make some kind of mistake? Jonathan suddenly took hold of both my shoulders. Heather, listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. Your mom and brother, they're the ones who are wrong. This isn't about being forgetful or flaky. They deliberately chose to ignore you. I know that. But it still hurts. Finally, I cried. Quietly, but uncontrollably. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin our special day. Don't apologize. You're not the one who should be sorry. From now on, let's build a life surrounded by people who truly value you. Me, my parents, we want you as part of our real family. You don't have to keep pushing yourself for theirs. I gave a small nod. You're right. I won't expect anything from them anymore. Anyone who can do something like this isn't my family anymore. And just like that, I felt the ice inside my chest begin to crack and melt. The week after the wedding, I finally made a decision about the mortgage payments I'd been covering for the past 2 years. I'm done. I repeated that thought over and over until one morning, after a night shift, I walked straight to the bank. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but underneath it all was a strange kind of relief, like I was reclaiming something that had always been mine. While finalizing the paperwork, I kept checking the notes in my wallet, meticulous records of every payment I had made. After my father passed away, I took over the mortgage because my mother couldn't handle it alone. To be honest, I couldn't really afford it either. The grueling ICU shifts, the endless nights, I'd even fallen ill a few times from the stress. But I never said a word. I didn't want to burden her. And still, she skipped my wedding to go on a family trip to Hawaii with my brother. And dismissed that betrayal with a single message, "It's just a minor thing." I closed the account and received the final statement. This is the end. I told myself that as I walked out of the bank. About a month later, one evening, I saw a familiar name pop up on my phone screen. My mother. For a moment, I hesitated. But I was done running. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Heather?" Her voice came through, irritated. "Hey, what's going on with the mortgage? I got a notice that this month's payment didn't go through." I paused, then answered quietly. "That's because I closed the account." "What? What are you talking about?" "I mean the mortgage account. The one I've been paying." I stopped. A long silence followed. Then her voice rose, sharp and accusatory. "Wait a second. You can't just do that out of nowhere. Don't you realize we've built our entire household budget around that?" "I see. But you told me not to call you over minor things, right?" "What did you say?" "That's not a minor thing. That's exactly why I'm calling. When you didn't come to my wedding, you said, 'It's just a minor thing. Stop calling me.' Don't you remember that?" I kept my voice steady, but I spoke clearly and firmly. "So now I'm giving you the same treatment. Don't call me over something as small as a missed payment. To me, it's just a minor thing." What's that supposed to mean?" "When you dismissed my wedding as a trivial thing, I realized something. My life's biggest milestone didn't matter to you at all." She didn't respond. In that silence, I continued speaking. "You didn't just skip my wedding. You went on a vacation with my brother's family, posted photos about how amazing it was, called it the perfect family trip. And I wasn't part of that family. You left me out. You threw me away. So now, I'm done supporting you. Because I'm not part of your family anymore." I heard the faint hitch in her breathing. I continued. "I spent an entire year preparing for that wedding. You said you were looking forward to it, didn't you? You told me over and over, 'I can't wait to see you in your wedding dress.' But the reality was different. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be betrayed by your own family on the most important day of your life?" That was just a coincidence. The trip had been planned for a long time, and it was the only time Steve was free. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you even send a message?" "All I got was, 'It's just a minor thing. Stop calling.' That was your response." As she started to speak again, I cut in, slowly and clearly. "So I made my decision too. If I'm just a minor part of your life, then I'm done being your daughter. I won't pay the mortgage anymore. From now on, I'll spend my time and money on me. I used to endure it all just because we were family. But I finally realized I don't have to let someone trample my life just because we share blood." There was a long silence before my mother's voice came through again, softer now. "I see. Okay, I'll ask Steve if he can take over the payments." "You should." Then I'll hang up. Goodbye. As soon as the call ended, I quietly placed my phone on the table. Some ties have to be cut before they cut me first. And today, I had finally severed it myself. Since then, I'd been enjoying a quiet newlywed with Jonathan. The pain hadn't fully disappeared, but at least now, every day spent with someone I could trust felt gentler, more peaceful than I'd imagined. 2 weeks later, Jonathan went on a business trip for a week, and I found myself enjoying some rare time alone. I treated myself to relaxing spa days and pampering sessions, and visited several cafes I had always wanted to try. I never realized how luxurious and healing it could be to spend quiet time alone. I even signed up for a cooking class I'd been curious about for a while and learned a few new recipes. When Jonathan got back, I planned to surprise him with his favorite wine and one of those new dishes. Those thoughts filled my days with quiet joy. The day before Jonathan was due home, I came back from a night shift and collapsed onto the sofa. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, and I drifted off to sleep. Ding dong. The sound of the doorbell snapped me awake. I checked the intercom and there she was. My mother. Why? Confused, I pressed the intercom button. When I opened the door, she stood there looking gaunt and worn out. She was nothing like the dignified woman people used to call the perfect teacher. Her eyes were tired. She gave a faint bow. "Can we talk for a moment?" I nodded silently and led her to the small guest space by the entrance. As soon as she sat down, she said, "I'm sorry, Heather. Not coming to your wedding. It was a terrible mistake. I don't have any excuses. I don't know what I was thinking." I stayed silent, letting her speak, not interrupting, not reacting. I asked Steve to take over the mortgage, but he said it's not possible. With the kids' tuition and his job not going well, he just can't. I frowned. So, I spoke slowly and evenly. "You came here because Steve said no, didn't you?" She looked down and gave a small nod. "Please, I'm begging you. I don't have any other way. I'll apologize 100 times if that's what it takes. Just once more, please help me." As I listened, I felt a dull ache deep inside me. For 2 years, I had silently made the payments. She took it all for granted, never once acknowledging what it cost me. And now, even as she apologized in person, what I felt wasn't the desire to forgive. "Mom, I'm not someone who just shows up when it's convenient for you. I'm not your ATM. I paid that mortgage for 2 years without a word. But what were you doing during that time? Did you ever even once say thank you?" She stared down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "I know, I was wrong, but..." "No. The moment you say but, your apology becomes meaningless. That's how it's always been with you. There's always a but, and somehow it becomes my fault. Not this time. I made up my mind that day. I won't give anything more to people who don't value me. Please don't say that. Just this once. Even just this month." I shook my head slowly. "I'm sorry. I can't go back. The image of that empty table on my wedding day, it'll never leave me. And when you brushed it off as a minor thing, something inside me broke beyond repair. Then, what am I supposed to do now? That's for you to figure out. As for me, I'm finally getting my life back. From now on, my time, my money, my emotions, they're all mine to use. You don't have to be so cold." "I'm not being cold. I'm setting boundaries. What I did for you all those years wasn't normal, it was excessive. This, right now? This is what normal looks like." My mother stood up. She staggered slightly and caught herself on the wall. "Fine. I won't ask again. But are you really okay with this?" I met her eyes and nodded clearly. "Yes, I am." She turned at the door and glanced back at me one last time. There was regret in her eyes. But whether I accepted it or not, that wasn't my responsibility anymore. When I shut the door, a quiet resolution settled inside me. I wasn't going back. The next day, Jonathan came home from his business trip. That evening, sitting across the table with him again, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. As I served the creamy chicken stew I'd learned in class, I told him everything that had happened the day before. My mom apologized, but in the end she came to ask me to resume the mortgage payments. I glanced at his face as I lifted my fork. "And you told her no?" "Yeah. I just couldn't keep sacrificing myself anymore." But part of me still wondered, was I too harsh? Too cold? Jonathan gave me a gentle smile and reached for my hand. "Heather, that wasn't cold. That was self-preservation. If you had kept going like that, you would have broken. You made the right choice." His words lifted a weight from my chest. The lingering guilt began to dissolve in the warmth of his voice. "Thank you, hearing that really helps." He smiled and said softly, "I'll always be on your side." Several days passed after that final conversation with my mother. I thought I had finally put the past behind me. But deep down, a small knot of unease remained. I didn't know why, just a quiet sense that something else was coming. And then, one Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. "Heather? What the hell is going on?" It was my aunt's voice, bursting with rage through the speaker. Shocked and confused, I stammered. "Aunt? What's wrong?" "Don't play dumb. Your mother showed up at my house in tears, saying you abandoned her, saying you're kicking her out and cutting her off. That the mortgage stopped out of nowhere, and now she can't afford to live. How could you be so heartless?" I let out a sigh. "Auntie, whatever Mom told you, it's probably really twisted." "Twisted? But didn't you suddenly stop paying the mortgage? Who does that to their own parent? Instead of repaying her, you abandoned her." "Wait, did she tell you about the wedding?" "On the day of my wedding, Mom was in Hawaii. She completely ignored the most important day of my life and later called it a minor thing. She didn't even show up." "What? I knew she went to Hawaii, but on your wedding day? That can't be true. She told me she was so excited for your wedding." "Exactly. She hid the inconvenient parts and made herself look like the victim. I paid the mortgage every month for 2 years. Not once did she say thank you, and on my wedding day, not only did she skip the ceremony, she posted on social media, bragging about how amazing her family trip was." Silence filled the other end of the line. "I have proof too. Screenshots of her posts. The message where she said it's just a minor thing. I saved everything." But what?" My voice trembled not with anger, but frustration. Because thanks to my mother's lies, I was being painted as an ungrateful daughter. I didn't abandon my family. My family abandoned me. My aunt didn't speak for a moment. Finally, she said, "You should talk things out again." Then she hung up. After that, more calls came. Uncles, cousins, distant relatives on my father's side. All asking the same question, why would you do such a thing? Some even said, only a cold-hearted person would abandon their mother. Each time, it felt like a heavy stone being hurled into my chest. As if I alone were the villain, the one who hurt my mother. The words I wanted to say reached the back of my throat, but I was too drained to explain anymore. No matter how carefully I told the story, it never seemed to outweigh my mother's tears and self-pitying lies. I could feel my energy slowly wearing away. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," I whispered one night. That evening, I told Jonathan everything. The calls from my relatives, the lies my mother was spreading, and how deeply each accusation hurt. Jonathan held my hand and looked at me seriously. "Heather, this isn't something you should carry alone. Let's talk to a lawyer. It's your right to be protected. And it's my job to help you make sure you are." His words finally gave me permission to breathe. I'd been raised to believe that airing family problems to outsiders was wrong. But what mattered more now was protecting my peace and dignity. So I quietly began organizing my evidence. Screenshots of Facebook posts. Bank records of the mortgage payments. My mother's message, "It's just a minor thing." And even the voice recording of our last conversation. I compiled them all into a single file. That weekend, Jonathan and I visited a law office. A young female attorney welcomed us and listened carefully to everything I shared. She nodded throughout. Given the emotional harassment and slander from extended family and the ongoing pressure, you do have a solid case for a restraining order. You have more than enough evidence. You can rest easy now? I felt something in my chest begin to loosen. "You mean I'm allowed to do this?" "Not only are you allowed, you should. You have every right to live in peace. It doesn't matter who it is, not even your own mother. No one has the right to hurt you." Tears welled up in my eyes. I had tried so hard to be a good daughter. That's why I didn't fight back. I kept forgiving. But not anymore. Now I had to protect my life. A few days later, the restraining order was officially granted. My mother was prohibited from contacting me, visiting me, or pressuring me through third parties. No more phone calls. No surprise visits. Everything cut off. It was a painful decision. But it was also the first real freedom I'd felt in years. When I told Jonathan, he gently pulled me into his arms. "You did the right thing." Those words made me feel like I could finally breathe again. I wouldn't let anyone make me feel invisible again. I had broken free from the chains of family. The week after the restraining order was enforced, my phone finally went quiet. The barrage of accusations from relatives and non-stop notifications vanished as if they had never happened. The tightly wound string inside me slowly began to unwind. That day, I felt something shift. For the first time, I thought, I never want to be hurt like that again. So I acted. It was the first time I'd ever drawn a line with someone I once called family. I had been terrified at first, afraid of being seen as a cold daughter or accused of being ungrateful. But now, I'm proud of the choice I made, proud to have protected myself. From now on, I can live for me. That thought began to change my everyday life in small but meaningful ways. Then one day, I received a message from Jonathan's mother, Kathy. To be honest, I was a little surprised. From the beginning of our marriage, Kathy never overstepped. She respected my boundaries, always giving me space. But even so, she consistently showed me that she cared. She would send me care packages with handwritten notes like "Don't push yourself too hard," or message me to say, "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Her kindness was never overwhelming or performative. It was gentle. And because it wasn't forced, it touched me even more. After the wedding incident, not only Kathy, but Jonathan's entire family began to treat me like I was truly one of their own. Surrounded by that warmth, my heart slowly began to open again. We're having a little dinner party at the house next week. We'd love for you both to come, if you're free. Her voice was calm and inviting, never formal or pushy. Thank you. We'd love to. I answered without hesitation. I truly wanted to go. It wasn't out of politeness or obligation, it felt like returning to a warm and welcoming place. That weekend, Jonathan and I visited his parents' home. Kathy and the others greeted us warmly, and the entire house radiated a comforting, peaceful atmosphere. As Kathy brought out the food, she looked at me and said, "Heather, I never got the chance to say this before, but you looked absolutely beautiful on your wedding day. I saw the pictures, your dress suited you perfectly." I smiled, a little shy. Thank you. To be honest, I was incredibly nervous that day. Well, you didn't show it at all. You stood there so confidently. I can see exactly why Jonathan chose you. Unexpectedly, something warm bloomed deep in my chest. My own mother had never said anything like that to me. No matter how much I did, how much I gave, it was never acknowledged, it was simply expected. But now, for the first time, I felt what it meant to be genuinely appreciated. Then, one day, my aunt called. "Heather, I owe you an apology," she said. "I completely misunderstood everything about you." I was stunned into silence. Jonathan called me. He explained everything, how much you sacrificed, how much that wedding meant to you, and even the mortgage payments. He explained it all, clearly and kindly. I'm truly sorry for the things I said. A wave of surprise and quiet warmth flooded through me. That night, I turned to Jonathan. "My aunt called today. She said you spoke with her, told her everything." Jonathan gave a small, sheepish smile and gently held my hand. "Yeah, I just couldn't stay silent anymore. You gave so much, and they turned on you. It made me angry. I couldn't say a word." A quiet, powerful warmth rose from somewhere deep inside me, and before I knew it, tears rolled down my cheeks. Jonathan, as always, pulled me into a gentle embrace and wiped them away. A few days later, another relative reached out. "To be honest, I don't think I can trust your mother anymore." The way she twisted the story, I never thought she was capable of that. His tone wasn't sympathetic, it was cold, detached. Now, my mother and brother were completely isolated from the rest of the extended family. But that wasn't my concern anymore. All I'll do now is quietly continue walking my own path. My name is Christina. I've spent my entire life sacrificing for the sake of my family's comfort. I even gave up my longtime dream of joining Doctors Without Borders. Tonight was supposed to be the moment all my hard work paid off. "The decorations are perfect," my mother Elizabeth whispered, helping me hang the celebration banner in the living room. But the catering might have been a bit over the top. My cheeks ached from exhaustion, but I forced a smile. "It's a special occasion, Mom. The house is finally paid off." The doorbell rang. Within moments, our modest living room filled with family, friends, distant relatives, and a few neighbors. As usual, my sister Madison arrived late, wearing a designer outfit that probably cost more than my weekly salary. Christy, she called, enveloping me in a hug that reeked of expensive perfume. This food is amazing. You've always been so good at organizing things. Organizing things? Sure, if by organizing she meant coordinating back-to-back surgeries while she ping-ponged between casinos and new credit card applications. Everyone gather around. My father, George, called out, tapping his spoon against a glass. We have a wonderful announcement. This wasn't in the plan. I had prepared a speech about perseverance, about how we'd finally reached the finish line together. First, my father continued, let me thank Christy for organizing this lovely party. She's always been our rock. His voice grew louder. But the real excitement is about Madison. She's finally getting her shot. She's on the verge of a financial comeback. Madison gave a nervous smile, and my heart pounded with dread. We've been talking about this for months. My father continued. And Elizabeth and I decided to help Madison get back on her feet. We took out a mortgage on the house to pay off her gambling debts. The champagne glass nearly slipped from my fingers. What? Isn't it wonderful? My mother said, touching my arm. Madison's getting a second chance. She's about to turn her life around. The room spun violently. My stomach twisted with rage and disbelief. 10 years of sleepless hospital shifts, 10 years of living on instant noodles, 10 years of extra shifts until my feet went numb, my dream of working in global medicine gone. When? My voice cracked with emotion. When exactly did you take out that new mortgage? About 3 weeks ago, my father replied with a dismissive wave. Right after you made the final payment. The timing was perfect. The house had value, and Madison finally had a plan. My mother turned to Madison, asking how it felt to be debt-free. I stood frozen, gripping my glass, watching 10 years of sacrifice vanish in an instant. To Madison. My father raised his glass. To new beginnings. Cheers erupted across the room as I silently calculated how many brain surgeries I'd performed to help pay off my parents' mortgage, also Madison could gamble again. Christy? My mother said, gently grabbing my arm. Aren't you going to toast to your sister's good fortune? I just need to step out, I whispered. I have to make a call. I slipped into the hallway and, with trembling fingers, dialed a number I had hoped I'd never need. The phone rang twice before a calm voice answered. Nathan Ford speaking. Nathan, it's Christy Johnson. Do you remember the legal protections we established, the ones securing my financial stake in the house payments? I remember, he said, his tone professional but sympathetic. Are you ready to trigger them? Through the hallway door, I could hear Madison talking about her new plans, our parents nodding along eagerly. Yes, I said, my voice barely audible. It's time. I locked myself in the bathroom, pressing my fevered forehead against the cool marble countertop. The sounds of celebration trickled in through the vent. Glasses clinked, laughter swelled, and above it all, I could hear Madison's voice. Did you secure all the paperwork? I asked Nathan, trying to steady my voice. Every payment record, every transaction, every legal document bearing your signature? He confirmed. The trust structure is airtight. Legally speaking, that house belongs to you alone. A sharp knock on the bathroom door made me flinch. Christy? Are you all right? My mother's worried voice. Just a minute. It's a work call, I replied. Once I was sure my mother had stepped away, I whispered urgently into the phone. How soon can we move forward? I can have legal notices delivered by Monday morning. But Christy, Nathan hesitated. Family legal disputes can get very messy. Through the vent, I heard someone ask, "Where's Madison's sister?" Her sister? Another voice answered with thinly veiled disdain. Oh, you mean the doctor? She's always working. Probably buried in patient charts or something. I clutched the phone tighter. I'm ready, Nathan. Send the documents. Now. After ending the call, I splashed cold water on my flushed face and opened the door. My mother was hovering nearby, visibly anxious. Madison's just about to share her recovery plan with everyone. Come down and show your support. I followed her downstairs. Madison had completely taken over the living room. The guests encircled her as she explained her grand new start and financial responsibility. This is just the beginning, she said with newfound confidence. Once I'm back on my feet, I can finally pursue my real passion. Remember when Christy wanted to join Doctors Without Borders? My father chuckled. I'm so glad she took the wiser path instead. After I got laid off, someone had to keep this family afloat. I remember it vividly. When my father lost his job, I was still a med student. My mother had wept at the kitchen table over possibly losing the house. I had promised I'd help, took on more hospital shifts, gave up sleep and relationships. And now, after 10 years of grinding, sleepless nights, I had finally paid off the mortgage. Only for them to remortgage it instantly, to pay off Madison's gambling debt. I just got called in for an emergency surgery, I muttered, grabbing my medical bag and heading for the door. I had sacrificed so much for this family. But this time was different. This time I had prepared for the betrayal. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Nathan, legal documents ready for filing Monday morning. Note: once initiated, settlement becomes highly unlikely. I stared at the screen, thinking about the trust paperwork. How Nathan had structured every payment to protect my share. How my parents had signed every document without fully reading them, trusting their doctor-daughter to handle the details. I had prayed I'd never need to act on it. But deep down, I hadn't trusted them enough not to. Proceed immediately, I replied by text. Then I started the engine and pulled away from the house. Soon, that house would be legally mine alone. When Monday morning arrived, I walked into Nathan's office. He carefully laid out the legal papers on his polished desk. All filed, he said, adjusting his titanium-framed glasses. The trust documents clearly designate you as the sole owner. Their new mortgage is entirely void without your signature. When will they be notified? The courier is delivering it today. I signed the final legal document. Hours later, my phone lit up over and over again. My mother, my father, even Madison. A message from my mother. Christy, we got the documents from the attorney. What did you do? Your father is having chest pains. Please call us immediately. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Madison. What the hell, Christy? She snapped before I could speak. You've invalidated the mortgage. I already enrolled in the recovery program. You only ever call me when you need financial rescue, I said coldly. This is completely unfair. Mom and Dad said the mortgage was paid off. That's right. I paid every mortgage bill, every property tax invoice, every repair expense for 10 years. Madison barked back. So what? Now you're sabotaging my recovery? I'm sick, Christy. This was my chance to finally get help. I thought about all the chances I didn't get. You've had more chances than I can count, Madison. And your gambling addiction? That's on you. This time you'll have to fund your recovery on your own. You've always resented me, she hissed. Mom and Dad just believed I needed support. No, I cut in firmly. They coddled you, and they believed your excuses. There's a difference. I kept my voice calm and clear. What about the deposit for the program? It was non-refundable $1,000, she said, her voice breaking. That's not my problem, I said flatly, and hung up. Then the phone rang again. It was my mother. How could you do this? She sobbed. To your own family? That's ironic, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I've been asking myself that same question for the past 10 years. We're your parents. We did what we did to help your sister recover. Why can't you understand that? And what about helping me chase my dream? I asked. A heavy silence settled between us. The legal notice spells everything out, I continued. The house is legally mine. The new mortgage is invalid. If you want to fund Madison's recovery, you'll need to find another way. You've changed, my mother whispered accusingly. I responded. You're right, Mom. I have changed. And this is what family is about, understanding that sacrifices deserve respect. I ended the call and sent a message to Nathan. Is there any chance they could challenge this in court? His reply came quickly. None. The house is yours. The next step is entirely your decision. I stared at my reflection in the window, replaying my mother's words. Had I truly changed, or had I simply stopped allowing myself to be exploited? The next morning, I drove to my parents' house, a folder of documents under my arm. Legally, it was my house now. Their cars filled the driveway: my mother's sedan, my father's SUV, and Madison's leased hatchback. They were waiting for me in the living room. My father paced nervously. My mother sat stiffly at the edge of the couch. Madison curled up defensively in the armchair, her eyes red and puffy. Did you come to celebrate your little victory? Madison asked bitterly as I placed the folder on the coffee table. No, I said calmly. I came to establish clarity. I pulled out the trust documents. This outlines the legal structure through which I paid off the mortgage. Note the dates, the signatures, all notarized and legally verified. My father grabbed the papers. This can't be right. We never agreed to put the house solely in your name. Actually, you did. Remember all those documents you signed without reading because you trusted your doctor-daughter to handle things properly? My mother began to cry quietly. Madison stood up, trembling with rage. Do you know what you've done? I committed to that recovery program. I paid a non-refundable admission fee. I made promises to my support group. No one said a word about the money when I was covering the property taxes, replacing the heating system, or fixing the roof leaks. That's completely different, my mother sobbed, cutting in. You were supporting your family. And I am still supporting this family. I'm teaching you a valuable lesson: read legal documents before signing them. Madison shot up from her chair. This is cruel. Dad, do something. My father kept flipping through the documents, his expression darkening. There has to be a loophole. We'll get our own lawyer. Please do, I replied, pulling out an additional folder. This contains copies of every check I've written, every maintenance bill I've paid, and every hospital shift I worked to keep this house from being foreclosed while Madison was busy gambling. You're just holding a grudge, she snapped. You're jealous because I'm finally getting help and facing my issues. I had dreams too, I said, my voice finally wavering with emotion. I wanted to join Doctors Without Borders. I wanted to provide care in crisis zones. I wanted a life that wasn't just being someone's emergency financial backup. No one forced you to support us, my father said defensively, his tone rising. Really? When I was a med student and you lost your job? When Mom cried every night at the kitchen table over losing the house? When you both emotionally guilt-tripped me while covering for Madison's gambling? The room went silent, except for my mother's muffled sobs. You wanted a house to remortgage? I continued, gathering my documents. Buy one yourself. This one is legally mine. I stood and said, the new mortgage is invalid. You have no legal claim to this property. So what happens now? Madison spat. Are you just going to kick your family out? No, I'm giving you 30 days to make other arrangements. That's more grace than I got when you secretly mortgaged the house I spent 10 years paying off. Please, my mother reached for my hand. We can figure something out. We're family. Don't, I pulled away. Don't lecture me about family obligations. Not anymore. As I turned to leave, Madison screamed behind me. You'll regret this forever. You'll end up miserable and alone. At that moment, my phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. Urgent. Need to speak ASAP about the mortgage filing. I rushed out of the house and met Nathan at a nearby cafe. When he arrived, the place was nearly empty. His expression was unusually grim. He spoke with grave seriousness. You need to understand something fundamental. There's a major secret your family's been keeping from you. What does that mean exactly? I asked, pushing my untouched cappuccino aside. Be specific. You weren't just being used for convenience. You were manipulated into division by someone. I've been digging for weeks, and I finally found the link. Nathan said. Before I could respond, a woman approached us. I recognized her face instantly. Valerie Irving. She had been a colleague of my father's at the company 10 years ago. I had exchanged pleasantries with her once or twice over a decade ago. Her complexion turned ashen when she saw me. There's something I've needed to tell you for a long time. Nathan contacted me, and I agreed to come. What's going on? I asked. Hillary spoke quietly. It's about your parents' house. The new mortgage filing, there's something you need to know. I already know it's invalid. No, it's worse than that. She sat on the chair. The mortgage filed under the pretense of Madison's debt was actually to cover payments your father's been making to a woman, his long-term mistress. He's been embezzling money from the company for years to support her. What? I said, stunned. Hillary pulled a heavy brown folder from her bag. These are the records. Emails, bank transfers, hotel receipts, all of it. Your father trusted me as the company's manager, so I had access. I kept this buried for 10 years. I tried to forget. But when Nathan reached out, I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. My hands trembled. Nathan placed a firm hand on my shoulder. How long had it been going on? I asked. At least 5 years, Hillary said quietly. And your father left the company just before anyone could officially question the financial discrepancies. Suddenly, everything fell into place. My father started mentioning a crisis at work right around the time I graduated from med school. That was the first lie. Thank you, Hillary, I said, reaching out to shake her hand. For bringing the truth to light. She hesitated, then took it nervously. Everyone at the company thought George was a good boss. But watching the funds vanish while knowing how much you were sacrificing for your family, it became unbearable. That night, I prepared for the final confrontation. After a detailed strategy session with Nathan, we assembled a large envelope. Inside, every piece of evidence of my father's fraud, along with the legal documentation asserting my sole ownership of the house. A few days later, I returned to the house. My parents and Madison were already there, watching me anxiously as I entered. Thank you for setting aside time to talk as a family, I began calmly. I'm here tonight to make my final decision. Christy, we can talk through anything, my mother said, her voice tight with unease. I placed the envelope on the dining table. This is something I need you to see before I leave. My father opened it with trembling hands. As he sifted through the documents, I watched the color drain from his face. What is this? He asked, his voice unsteady. The truth, I said. Hillary gave it to me. This isn't about Madison's debts, it's about your double life. You asked me to cover the mortgage under the guise of her treatment expenses. That was a lie. My sacrifices funded your affair. My mother picked up one of the documents, reading it with disbelief. Her hands began to shake. The blood vanished from her face. George, is this true? He stood abruptly and slammed his fist on the table. This is none of your business. I have a right to privacy. Privacy? I said coolly. I gave up my life, my dream of joining Doctors Without Borders, my happiness, all so you could keep yours secret. Madison sat in stunned silence, reading the pages in front of her. So I was just the scapegoat, she said quietly, her voice trembling with rage. Mom and Dad always talked about my debts, my problems, my treatment. But all along it was about covering your hidden life. She looked up at me, eyes full of tears. Christy, I didn't know, I swear. This is ridiculous. My father shouted. These documents are fake. Hillary's trying to ruin me. Unfortunately for you, they're not fake, I said, pulling out the final piece of evidence. This is a bank-certified confirmation. The payments listed as Madison's treatment were actually routed to an account belonging to Linda Morrison. You also rented an apartment for her 5 years ago. She's even listed as the guarantor on your secondary lease. My mother began to weep softly. How could you do this to us? My father stood violently, heading for the door. I don't have to sit here and be interrogated like this. Don't leave, I said firmly. There's one more document in that envelope, a notarized certificate invalidating the mortgage, and a copy of the criminal complaint I intend to file with the police. He froze in place. You what? You committed fraud, embezzled company funds, submitted false information to the bank, and worst of all, deceived me into giving up 10 years of my life. There is no choice left. Tomorrow I'm filing it formally. You're going to send your own father to prison? My mother asked, her voice shaking. I'm going to reveal the truth, I said. And I'm going to seek justice. Suddenly, Madison stood up and moved beside me. I'm with Christy, she said. Her voice was clear, steady, strong. You turned us against each other and you made me the scapegoat and chained Christy to a sense of obligation. That ends now. My father looked at us, a mixture of anger and fear on his face. This is a family matter. We don't need to involve the police. Financial crime is not a family matter, I said firmly. You're a fraud and I won't protect you anymore. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. My father was arrested on charges of bank fraud and embezzlement. The news spread quickly throughout our small town. During the trial preparation, Madison moved into my apartment. She was serious about rebuilding her life. I still can't believe it, she said one evening as we ate dinner at my kitchen table. All this time we thought we were enemies. But really, we were both victims. Dad kept us divided to hide his actions, I said. Classic divide and conquer. I look back on my life and feel ashamed, she admitted. I had real issues, yes, but some of those came from being part of this twisted family dynamic. On the day of the trial, we stood together in court. My mother sat in the back row, silent through the entire hearing. The judge delivered a harsh sentence, 5 years in prison and full restitution of the embezzled funds. After the verdict, our mother approached us. Christy Madison, she said, her voice weary. I'm so sorry. I can't claim I didn't see it, but I wanted to believe George. I needed to believe him. Mom, I said calmly. You made a choice, and choices come with consequences. From now on, I won't be providing financial support. You need to live your own life. But what am I supposed to do? She asked, her voice small. Get a job, Madison said gently but firmly. Like I did. I'm working as a barista at a coffee shop. It's not glamorous, but it's a start. Months later, I finally submitted my application to Doctors Without Borders. Madison helped me with the last of the paperwork. You're really going? She asked, placing a stamp on the envelope. I've dreamed of this for so long, I said with a smile. It's time. I'll miss you, she admitted. But I'll take care of the house while you're gone. I smiled. I'm going because I want to, not because I feel like I have to. That's the difference. And I'm staying because I want to, Madison said. For the first time, I think we're finally truly sisters. That night, we sat together on the porch, looking up at the stars. For the first time in a decade, I felt free. Free from the burden of responsibility that was never fairly mine. Free to live a life that belonged to me. And most of all, free to build a new relationship with Madison, one not rooted in guilt or duty, but in mutual respect. Thank you, Madison whispered, for believing in me. We're just getting started, I replied. One step at a time. This place suits you perfectly. Huh? A doghouse? After finally arriving following a 3-hour flight and a long journey from the airport, my sister Olivia laughed and pointed to a corner of the garden. The tables are all full, but this is perfect for you, don't you think? What stood there was a log cabin-style doghouse, decorated quite lavishly. A bone-shaped sign with a dog's name, carved into it hung at the entrance. My mother was laughing at this too. Feeling like garbage, I quietly whispered to myself, I'll no longer try to be loved by these people. This morning my son and I had boarded a plane to attend my sister's birthday party. We keep our living situation today. Okay? I said softly but seriously to Lucas and Tyler as they fastened their seatbelts in the back seat. Yeah, I understand, 13-year-old Lucas nodded, while 10-year-old Tyler murmured, we just need to act normal, right? A 3-hour flight, then another 40 minutes by taxi from the airport. The beautifully trimmed lawns and carefully arranged trees outside the car window cleared that this place is an upscale residential area. Within the gated community stood homes that looked like they had stepped out of architecture magazines, with my sister's house being particularly eye-catching among them. I placed a white paper bag on my knee. Inside were homemade lavender cookies and a hand-drawn card. Perhaps not suitable for a party in a mansion worth tens of millions, but they were gifts prepared with all my heart. The taxi slowly came to a stop, and the driver turned around. Is this the right place? Yes, thank you. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The strong midsummer sunlight reflected off the glamorous garden decorations, burning my eyes. White and gold balloons, chandelier-like lights, and the murmur of dressed-up people. Music played faintly in the background. As we walked along the path to the entrance, Tyler tugged at my sleeve. Mom, are you nervous? I smiled. Just a little. But it's okay. We're family after all. When I rang the bell, my mother appeared at the door. She simply said, "So you came," and directed her gaze not at me, but at the children. Then my sister Olivia appeared, perfectly dressed in a designer gown, with an ideal smile fixed on her lips. Well, you actually came. That 3-hour flight must have been exhausting. Your dress is casual. To those words that could be taken as either sarcasm or a joke, I simply nodded with a smile. I baked cookies for you all. They're lavender-flavored, I said, offering the bag. My sister pinched it with her fingertips and peered inside as if appraising it. Well, cheers rose from inside the house. Unfamiliar guests were raising their glasses and enjoying the party with smartphones in hand. Please come in, or I would say, but the living room is already full. We've prepared a special place for you all. Mom, can you show them? My mother nodded with an unnatural smile. Follow me. It's outside, but it's in the shade, so it's cool. For a moment, something just didn't feel right. But seeing the children exchanging anxious glances, I swallowed that feeling. It's okay. Let's go. At this point, I still didn't know. Outside in the garden, the green lawn stretched out under the midsummer sun. A bar counter with a tent, guests chatting with champagne in hand. Flower petals floated in the marble fountain, and jazz music played softly in the background. This way, my mother said, pointing to a corner of the garden. A small wooden structure stood slightly off to the side of the party, resembling a quaint log cabin. But at its entrance hung a bone-shaped plate with Bruno written on it. Is this? As Lucas began to speak, my mother casually opened the door. It's in the shade, and there's a nice breeze. It's a quiet, peaceful place perfect for you all. It was a doghouse. Inside was an old cushion and a bed with bite marks from stuffed toys. Metal food and water bowls sat in the corner. You're joking, right? I said in a hushed voice, and my sister Olivia appeared behind me. Sorry, but all the other seats are full, but don't worry. This suits you perfectly. The children must be used to it, right? The leftovers. My sister handed pet food dishes to my two sons, 13-year-old Lucas and 10-year-old Tyler. Inside were cold roast beef and the remains of gravy sauce clinging to the corner of the plate. Some of the guests looked over, but no one said anything. They just exchanged glances for a moment, then returned to their drinks. Tyler tugged at my sleeve, suppressing his voice. "Mom, am I supposed to eat here?" I put on a smile, but my lips were trembling. "It's okay, just for a little while. Then we'll go home." Reluctantly, I had the children sit in front of the doghouse. Lucas picked up his fork without saying anything, looking down at the paper plate. But his hand was shaking. Tyler reached for the bread but quickly put it down. "Why do we have to eat in a place like this?" I couldn't answer that question. I just placed my hands gently on their backs and closed my eyes. Music and laughter echoed in the distance. An elegant cake stand stood in the middle of the garden, where men and women laughed together under the chandelier's glow. Olivia in her white dress behaved like the perfect hostess, while my mother watched proudly. "Mom, those people are looking at us," Lucas whispered. When I looked up, several guests were staring at us, but their gazes held neither sympathy nor righteousness, only a cold indifference, a desire not to get involved. Tyler murmured softly, "Did we do something wrong?" I held his small hand and hugged him tightly. "No, you haven't done anything wrong. You are the most wonderful boys." As I said this, I desperately held back my tears. But tears fell from Tyler's eyes, one after another. I can't take this anymore." He dropped the fork on the grass and clung to me, his small shoulders trembling. Lucas also frowned and said quietly, looking away, "Putting us in a place like this, those people aren't family." I gently stroked both their heads. I didn't know what words could heal this wound. Just watching my children hanging their heads on the cold grass, something inside my chest broke with a sound. "Let's go home," I said. Lucas looked up. "Really?" "Yes, we don't need to stay here anymore." As I stood up and was about to get our bag, I heard laughter from a distance. In the center of the garden, Olivia and my mother were talking with someone. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, as if they had already forgotten about relegating us to the doghouse. "Do you think they really meant it when they said suitable place?" Lucas murmured. I nodded quietly. "Yes. But their idea of what suits us has nothing to do with our worth." I went back to the living room to get our bag. I passed several guests on the way, but no one tried to make eye contact. No one stopped me. No one called out to me. I picked up the handbag I had left in the room and went back outside. The children were already standing. Tyler's eyes were red, but he had wiped away his tears and was facing forward. "Mom, let's get out of here. We can hold our heads high, right?" I smiled proudly. "Of course, we have nothing to be ashamed of." It happened just as we were about to walk toward the gate. My sons and I were crossing the pathway, approaching the entrance to the party venue. "Sorry I'm late." A man shouted as he rushed into the entrance carrying a large bouquet. He still held his smartphone in one hand, still on a call. His figure, showing signs of haste and sweat, rushed toward the venue. I tried to move out of the way, but it was too late. "I'm sorry." From the impact of him bumping into me without noticing, my bag fell from my hand. "Are you okay?" "I'm really sore." At that point, his movement stopped. While looking at my fallen bag, he slowly raised his face and froze as he met my eyes. "Eliza?" At that moment, I clearly saw his face too. "James?" Just then, my sister appeared from behind with my mother, her dress hem swirling. "James, we've been waiting for you, you're late." Sorry, Olivia. "I just finished work, and there was traffic from the airport." Saying this, James handed the bouquet he was holding to my sister. "Here, with the peonies you like? I'm glad I made it in time." As my sister accepted it with a smile, James glanced at me and continued speaking. "I'm really surprised. I had no idea Eliza would be at this party." At those words, I felt a jolt. "What? You know Eliza?" "Of course. In fact, it would be unusual to find someone who doesn't know her." James said this while returning his gaze to me, smiling a little sheepishly before clearly stating, I never expected to meet you in a place like this. CEO, it's been a while. James took my hand with an expression that couldn't hide his surprise and delight. At those words, my sister's eyes widened, and my mother whispered, CEO? James turned around and answered casually, I worked with Eliza once. I never expected to see her here today. Olivia's face visibly stiffened. What do you mean by worked with? James said with a puzzled look. Ha, you didn't know? She's the founder of Heritage Spice? Her YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers, and she's now a charismatic figure in the seasoning industry. No way. Olivia gasped in disbelief. You're joking. You're from that company? James added with a bright smile. The spice set I received at last month's lecture was very popular with the restaurant chefs. I smiled awkwardly. Thank you. I never expected to meet in a place like this. Several guests who had been chatting nearby perked up their ears. A woman tilting her champagne glass whispered, Heritage, you mean that one? You're the CEO? My mother quietly asked. I took a deep breath. There was no point in hiding it anymore. Yes, I am. Tyler squeezed my hand tightly, and Lucas lifted his face and looked at me proudly. James, who had been watching us intently, suddenly turned to my sister. Olivia, you knew Eliza? My sister's face stiffened for a moment. But perhaps sensing the gazes around her, she reluctantly answered. She's my sister. James's eyes widened. Your sister? This is the first time I've heard you have a sister. It wasn't worth mentioning. My sister's voice carried a trace of bitterness. But James didn't seem satisfied with that answer. He turned his gaze back to me and said with a smile, By the way, your new product line this season is being talked about as revolutionary in the industry. I think your talent for blending spices is genuine. It's truly an honor to meet you today, as a fellow professional. Somewhat surprised by James's straightforward words, I smiled naturally. Thank you. I'm happy to hear you say that. My voice was quiet, but those words were tinged with the pride and relief of someone who had stopped hiding. At that moment, a clear murmur began to spread among the guests who had been eavesdropping. Eliza is from that Heritage? Unbelievable. To think the actual person would be in a place like this. Wait, isn't she the woman who was just at the doghouse? I could see whispers being exchanged as glances were cast in our direction, spreading like ripples throughout the entire venue. I straightened my back and gently placed my hands on the children's shoulders. We'll be leaving now. When I said this, James nodded slightly. Before you go, may I take a photo with you? I want to show it off to my staff. Tyler and Lucas looked at each other and smiled. That's great, Mom. With a small smile, I wrapped my arms around the children's shoulders. Of course. It would be my honor, I replied. He took out his smartphone and stood beside us with a natural smile. In front of the camera, Lucas and Tyler also pressed their shoulders together and smiled brightly. The world was slowly beginning to change. Excuse me, may I have your attention for a moment? James's voice rang out clearly amid the garden's murmurs. He put his smartphone back in his pocket and slowly stepped forward. There stood the guests, still frozen as they tried to grasp the situation, along with my confused sister and mother. Since we have this opportunity, allow me to introduce someone, James said with a smile. This is Eliza, founder and CEO of Heritage Spice, and also a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. At that moment, the atmosphere of the party completely changed. A woman holding a champagne glass tilted it in surprise, and men sitting on sofas widened their eyes and stood up. Excuse me, my daughter is a huge fan. Could I possibly get your autograph? I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded gently. Of course. Thank you. Watching this, Tyler exclaimed, Mom, you're amazing. While Lucas proudly puffed out his chest. She's my mom. She's really amazing. Hearing this, another guest approached shyly. "I always watch your YouTube, and your bento recipes are super helpful." From behind them, a middle-aged man called out, "My wife is a huge fan. She watches your videos every day and always says her videos make cooking enjoyable." Then a young woman, clutching her smartphone, said with a smile, "I'm looking forward to your next sweets episode." Everyone at my workplace shares and watches them together. Before I knew it, people had begun to gather around me, one by one. People who knew my content, not just my name. I responded politely and carefully to each person, as if it were perfectly natural for me to be standing there. But my sister's and mother's expressions began to change visibly. "I never heard about this. Not at all. You never said a word about any of this," my sister whispered in a trembling voice. My mother stood speechless with shock. I looked them straight in the eyes. There was no anger or hatred in my gaze. Only a quiet determination resided there. "Do you think you would have believed me if I had told you?" My mother couldn't answer. Her mouth remained open as her eyes darted around. "You've always looked down on me. When I said I loved cooking, you laughed and said, 'At least you're good at housework.' When I got divorced, you treated it like proof of a failed life, and assumed that not being a full-time employee meant I was unstable and pitiful. I thought you invited me for your birthday, but you led us to a doghouse. That's because you truly believed that's what suits me, right?" Each word was infused with accumulated pain. "You just didn't want to accept that even a divorced single mother can create a life to be proud of with enough effort. Because if I were happy, it would destroy the meaning of everything you've done." I looked at my mother and sister once more. For the first time, their expressions showed genuine distress. As I looked at my mother and sister once more, James, who had been silently listening to this exchange from a short distance away, gently added, "When I first encountered Eliza's products, I felt not just the visual beauty, but a conviction behind the flavors. I had always wanted to know who created them." James continued as he slowly approached us. "Today, hearing your words, I understand clearly where that passion comes from." His words were quiet, but each one was straightforward and made the air tremble. And then, looking not at me but at my sister and mother, he said, "Olivia, if you had truly seen her instead of looking down on her, you could have noticed before anyone else. Eliza hasn't merely succeeded. She was repeatedly ignored and looked down upon, yet she never gave up and believed in herself, and as a result, built her current position." Hearing his words, I felt a quiet warmth ignite deep in my chest. The comfort and warmth of knowing that someone had been watching quietly seeped into my heart. "Stop it!" My sister cried out with a voice like a scream. "Everyone's being deceived. This person, she's been hiding it from us all along." James firmly replied, "She wasn't hiding it. You all just never let her speak, did you?" Silence fell. It was broken by Lucas's words. "Mom has been working hard for us ever since she separated from Dad." His voice was quiet but had a firm core. From early morning until late at night, she filmed videos, edited them, and made test batches of seasonings over and over. Despite all that, she still made lunches for me and Tyler. Even though it was tough, she was always smiling. I saw it all clearly. Tyler also nodded slightly beside him. "I love you, Mom." At their words, I felt a warmth deep in my chest. More than any applause or praise, those words from my children were the most important validation for me. Unable to hold back, I gently pulled Lucas and Tyler close and embraced them tightly. "Thank you, Mom is truly happy to have you both." Several guests who had been watching this scene slowly but surely began to applaud. Eventually it spread, expanding throughout the center of the party, as if celebrating a new guest of honor. "Eliza, do you have plans for a recipe book?" "I'll definitely buy it." "Looking forward to seeing your next video." Among the guests laughing and saying such things, There was no longer a place for my sister and mother. I quietly said, "Thank you, but we'll be taking our leave now." Several guests looked disappointed, but no one tried to stop us. After experiencing her dignity, they understood this was only natural. I headed toward the gate with my children. I took one last look at the venue. We have a place to return to. Saying this, I took Lucas and Tyler's hands and left the venue. In the blazing afternoon sun, there was no hesitation or pain in my back. Only quiet pride and certain hope. This incident was quickly spread and became a topic on social media the following day. Posts about the woman in the doghouse was actually the CEO of a famous seasoning brand went viral, with videos and photos being shared one after another. Many warm messages were sent to me. Because of this, I began to receive far more attention than I had ever imagined. Publishing contract offers and speaking requests from companies and schools came one after another, and my days became busier than ever before. My sister and mother must have been at a loss for words upon discovering that the family failure they had looked down on was actually receiving great trust and recognition from the public. However, this wasn't a case of me gaining attention because I was once degraded. I felt that my worth had been there all along from the beginning. It had simply, at last, come to the world's attention. 3 months later, we moved to a new home. It was a modern, open house standing on a small hill in the suburbs. From the glass-walled living room, you could see the spacious garden and the lush forest beyond it. The large dining table was filled with an array of colorful dishes. It was a carefully prepared homemade menu, including prototypes for my newly launched second brand, Root Flame. "Mom, these pickles are so delicious," Tyler shouted with his cheeks full, while Lucas poured sparkling water instead of wine into his glass and smiled. "Can I lead the toast?" Just then, a smartphone rang. The screen displayed my aunt's name. "Eliza? Do you have a moment?" "Oh, yes. What is it?" A voice from the other end of the phone was mixed with a sigh. "I got a call from your sister the other day. She said she couldn't get in touch with you." I didn't say anything, holding my phone tighter in my hand. "She asked me if I could somehow contact you. She's been saying she wants to talk when the time is right, but I'm sure she doesn't know what to say anymore." I exhaled briefly. "There's nothing left to talk about." "Don't say that. Your sister seems to be regretting a lot of things now." "It seems Olivia's engagement with James was broken off too. Can't you somehow start over as a family?" "Their regret is their own problem. For me, that day was the last. I can't imagine wanting to be family after being treated like that." On the other end of the phone, my aunt fell silent, as if at a loss for words. I continued quietly. "I finally found my place. So I don't plan to go back. Rather than clinging to the past, I want to live with people who truly value me." "I see. That makes sense. I can't force you. I'm sorry." I lowered my eyes slightly. After a moment of silence, my aunt said in a somewhat softer voice, "But you know, Eliza, the world is surprisingly fair. People who are watching really see. So hold your head high." I smiled slightly. "Thank you. Don't worry. I won't shrink away anymore, no matter what happens." With that, I hung up the phone. When I turned around, Lucas and Tyler were running around in the garden, laughing with water guns in their hands. Looking at that casual scene, I quietly thought, this moment right here is the most precious and truly happy. About a year later, a letter arrived in the mailbox. On the back were written the names of my sister and mother. I took it, silently threw it in the trash without opening the seal. Without surprise or hesitation. I'm no longer weak enough to be swayed by words written there. That night, laughter filled the dining room of our home. As Lucas and Tyler blew out the candles on the homemade chocolate cake, I smiled amid loud applause. James stood in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a special herb roast for me. After breaking off his engagement with Olivia, He became an advisor for my brand, and we met many times during photo shoots and product development. His sincere approach to cooking and his honest attitude at all times gradually allowed me to open my heart. While building trust as business partners, a natural bond began to form between us. It wasn't about competing or taking from each other, but about building something together. It was completely different from what I once knew as family. Warm lighting and the presence of people with whom I could truly feel at ease. That was my family now. Once I was obsessed with blood ties and desperately wanted to be loved. No matter how coldly I was treated, I convinced myself it was because there was something lacking in me. But now I can clearly say, my mistake was entrusting my worth to others' evaluations. In this past year, I've clearly learned. Instead of trying to gain the love of people who don't accept you, if you create your own place, the right people will come. When I chose and built that place, relationships full of trust and respect naturally gathered around me. Now I have a space where I can be myself without having to flatter anyone or fear rejection. I leaned back on the sofa, listening to the children's laughter, and quietly closed my eyes. I no longer need to live to meet someone else's expectations. I live my life. And that is not something given by someone else, but something I choose with my own hands. I suddenly remembered myself from a year ago. That day when I endured humiliation in front of my children at the doghouse. But without that day, I wouldn't have come this far. It was a life built by my own hands, filled with pride and dignity. Then Lucas said to me, "Hey Mom, I think I might actually like that day when we were in the doghouse, just a little bit." I looked at him in surprise. Why? Because without that day, I don't think we would have become this strong. I looked at my son and slowly nodded. Yes, that day wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. My story is no longer about being leftovers. Samantha, hey, how's the wedding prep going? The call came the day before the wedding from Jessica, a friend from my college days. Thanks, Jessica. Things are finally coming together. By the way, isn't your sister coming to the wedding? I hesitated. What? Of course she is. The whole family's supposed to be there. Really? I could have sworn I saw a post this morning on Alexandra's Instagram. It looked like she was in Europe. Maybe I'm wrong? My heart started pounding. Hold on. Let me check. Samantha, it might be nothing. Could be a mix-up or something. Thanks for telling me, Jessica. I hung up and, with shaking hands, opened Alexandra's Instagram. The second I saw her latest post, my face was drained of blood. In the photo, Alexandra's children were smiling in front of a picturesque European street. The caption read, "Family trip to Europe. Having the best vacation ever with Mom and Dad." I stared at the screen in disbelief, over and over. The comments were full of local friends saying things like, "What a lovely trip," and "Enjoy your break." With trembling fingers, I called my mother. When she finally picked up, her voice was clearly flustered. "Oh, Samantha, what's wrong?" "Mom, where are you right now? My wedding is the day after tomorrow." There was a long silence. Then she answered, barely above a whisper. "Well, Alexandra said she wanted to take the kids on a trip to Europe. She said it's now or never while they're still little. But we've had the date set for over a year. Didn't you say you booked flights and hotels?" "About that." Her voice dropped even lower. "The money you sent us, we used it to cover Alexandra's family trip. I just wanted to give the kids some beautiful memories." I was speechless. The $20,000 I had saved from my own pocket to invite my family to my wedding had been used instead for their European vacation. "Mom, what about my wedding?" "I'm sorry, Samantha. But you have so many friends, don't you? You'll be fine without us. Honestly, the kids." I hung up. My fiancé, Michael, looked at me with concern. "Samantha? Are you okay?" I shook my head, tears silently streaming down my face. After a whole year of planning, not a single member of my family was coming to the wedding. Worse, they were enjoying a European vacation funded by me. The $20,000 had been meant to cover flights and hotel accommodations for my parents and my sister's entire family from California to my university on the East Coast. It wasn't a small amount by any means, but having my family there for what was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime wedding held a value that money simply couldn't measure. To have that goodwill thrown aside left me deeply, utterly disappointed. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror in my white dress. It was perfect. The silk hugged my body beautifully, and the lace sparkled in the soft light. My hair and makeup turned out exactly as I had envisioned. The hairstylist swept my hair into an elegant updo, and the makeup artist gave me a radiant, bridal glow that felt both graceful and celebratory. And yet, as I looked at my reflection, a deep loneliness sat heavy in my chest. This was supposed to be the most special day of my life. But not a single person from my own family was there to celebrate it with me. In the car on the way to the chapel, Michael's parents, George and Kathy, spoke softly. "Samantha, we'd be honored to represent your side of the family today. You're like our own daughter." Kathy's warm voice and kind eyes wrapped around my aching heart. Her words brought tears to my eyes before I even realized it. They weren't my blood relatives, but maybe that was what real family looks like. At the chapel, I glanced at the family seating area. White roses and Casablanca lilies adorned the seats. A gold plaque read "Family," but only Michael's parents, George and Kathy, sat there. The seats next to them, meant for my mother and sister, were painfully empty. Those empty chairs told every guest the truth: my own family hadn't shown up. Shame and sadness surged inside me. But then I looked at those empty seats and made a quiet vow. I would never expect anything from them again. If they couldn't be there for the most important day of my life, they didn't deserve another ounce of my hope or pain. After the ceremony, I received no messages from my family. There were no words of congratulations, no apologies for missing the ceremony. It was as if my wedding had never happened. Just complete, deafening silence. Messages of congratulations kept pouring in from friends, one after another. And yet, from my own family, nothing. That stark contrast made it painfully clear just how broken our relationship had become. Photos from Alexandra's European vacation continued to appear on her social media. Smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, posing at the Colosseum in Rome, dining in upscale restaurants, the images were vibrant, joyful, and all posted during the same week as my wedding. Yet not once did she mention my wedding. It became painfully clear for her, a vacation in Europe mattered more than her sister's marriage. Michael noticed I was feeling down and gently asked about it. I told him, "I'm fine now. If anything, I feel relieved to finally see who they really are." 2 weeks after the wedding, I received a thick envelope from a law office. The sender was the legal firm handling my late grandmother Dorothy's estate, She had passed away a year ago, so I hadn't expected any further proceedings. Inside was a document titled Final Notice Regarding Estate Distribution. An attached letter read, "In accordance with the final wishes of the late Dorothy, we are notifying you of a significant change in the distribution of her estate." I sat down on the couch, my heart pounding, and began to read. Grandma Dorothy was a retired elementary school teacher who always believed that education could change lives. When I was applying to college, she had helped me fill out scholarship forms and even practiced interviews with me. According to the document, she had left behind an estate worth $800,000. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. Enclosed was a handwritten letter from my grandmother. To my dearest Samantha. Originally, I had planned to divide this inheritance equally among you, your mother, and Alexandra. But after what happened last Christmas, I changed my mind. Do you remember when you talked about wanting to support children's education through a nonprofit, and your mother said, "Stop with the holier-than-thou act and focus on your real family"? That was the moment I knew. You're the only one who would truly use this money for good. So I've decided to leave the entire inheritance to you alone. As I read those words, the memory of that moment returned vividly. I had shared my dream of helping underprivileged children get access to education, and my mother had scoffed. "You can't even take care of your own family, and you're worried about strangers?" What shocked me even more was realizing they had already counted on receiving that inheritance. The day after Alexandra returned from her trip, my mother called me. It was perfectly timed. "Samantha, I wanted to talk to you about Grandma's estate." There was no trace of apology for missing the wedding. Her voice was full of anticipation. "Alexandra's thinking about remodeling our house into a two-family home. If we lived together, I could help with the kids, and she could open a salon in the house. You know she has her cosmetology license, right? We thought it would be a great idea to use some of Grandma's money for the renovation. Would you be willing to help out a bit?" As she spoke, all I could think of was how they had spent the $20,000 I gave them for my wedding trip on their vacation instead. And now, they were coming for the inheritance too. "Mom, did you read Grandma's will?" "What? No, not yet. The lawyer hasn't shown it to us. They keep saying it's complicated or that the documents aren't ready. But I remember your grandmother saying, 'There's something I want to leave to everyone before she moved to the retirement home.' And she had that big house and property. Remember? I even heard from someone that Grandma had more money than we thought. Anyway, we're supposed to split it 3 ways, right? Even if you keep most of it, surely you can share a little." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I received the will. Grandma left everything to me. It's in writing." There was a long pause. Then her voice exploded. "That's impossible. I'm her daughter. And Alexandra is her grandchild." She also left a letter explaining why. She said she changed her mind after seeing your reaction when I talked about starting a nonprofit organization for education. So your fake little charity act means your whole family has to be cut out. And just like that, I knew Grandma was right. Even then, my mother saw helping children as fake and selfish. After hanging up, I thought of something my grandmother once told me. She was gently holding my hand and said, "Real education isn't just about gaining knowledge. It's about growing a heart that wants to help others. When you can use what you've learned to lift someone else, That's when your learning is truly complete. At the time, I didn't fully grasp the depth of my grandmother's words, but now, their true meaning has become unmistakably clear. I made my decision. I would use her inheritance to establish a non-profit organization called Learning for Tomorrow. I wanted to provide scholarships to children at risk of losing their educational opportunities due to financial hardship so they could keep pursuing their dreams without giving up. I'm certain that using the inheritance my grandmother left me not for personal comfort, but to help shape a better future for these children, is the truest way to honor her wishes. With her spirit guiding me, I stepped into a new purpose. As I began the process of founding the organization, Michael stood by me without hesitation. "Samantha, your grandmother was an incredible woman, and she knew you'd make the right choice." "Michael, it hurt when my family didn't come to our wedding. But maybe that was the wake-up call I needed. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters." As I continued preparing for the NPO's launch, I found many supporters. Michael's colleagues offered their help, and several of my client companies pledged funding. But the calls from my mother didn't stop. Every day she had something new to say. "Samantha, think about this. It's $800,000. If you give it all away, what about your future? Mom, I have a stable income, and I have Michael. What matters most is using this money the way Grandma wanted. Even if your grandmother wanted that she's gone now, you need to think about the living members of your family." My mother's voice rang in my ears, but my mind drifted to the final lines of Grandma's letter. "Samantha, sometimes even with family, it's necessary to keep your distance. It's just as important to protect yourself from those who might take advantage of your kindness." I took a steady breath and responded, "Mom, my decision is final. I'm going to use Grandma's inheritance exactly as she intended. If you go through with this, you're cutting yourself off from this family." "Then so be it. When you chose a vacation over my wedding, you have already made your choice." After I hung up, I went straight to the law office and officially finalized the paperwork to launch my NPO. That evening, as Michael and I quietly shared dinner together, I felt peace for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered silently. "Your legacy will help light the future for so many children." Signing the founding documents for Learning for Tomorrow, I felt like I had opened the door to a new life. I would no longer be swayed by my family's expectations or demands. From now on, I will live according to my own values. A month after Learning for Tomorrow was established, my peaceful days were shattered. It happened on an ordinary morning, as I was sipping coffee and scrolling through social media. On Facebook, a post from my mother immediately caught my eye. She had uploaded a photo from my college graduation and written a long caption beneath it. "To all my friends, I want to share something painful. My daughter Samantha has taken my late mother's $800,000 inheritance all for herself. Money that should have been shared among family is now being poured into her selfish charity. I take full responsibility for raising a daughter who values strangers over her own blood. We now have to give up on the hope of renovating our home or saving for our grandchildren's education. Please understand the heartbreak of a mother whose child has forgotten her duty to family." I froze, staring at the screen. The post already had over 30 likes and dozens of comments. Most of them were sympathetic toward my mother. "What a terrible daughter. Family should come first. She may be educated, but clearly lacks heart." "You poor thing. I hope things get better." But what stung the most was a comment from Alexandra. She had shared the post with her own note. "My sister has always only cared about herself. She invited us to her wedding without considering our situation, then got angry when we couldn't come. Now she's hoarding Grandma's inheritance and ignoring the needs of her nieces and nephews. What happened to family values?" My hands trembled. Everything about my wedding had been twisted. There was no mention of the $20,000 I had spent to bring them to the ceremony. Money they had instead used for a European vacation. What shocked me even more was seeing a comment from my Uncle Frank. "I'm truly disappointed in Samantha. She was always bright, but is clearly lacking love for her family. Dorothy must be heartbroken, even in the afterlife." I took deep breaths and told Michael everything. He listened quietly, then said, "Samantha, this is completely false. I was there. I know exactly what happened. But people in our community will only see their posts. They don't know my side of the story." That afternoon, I received a call from one of my client companies. "Hi Samantha, we need to talk about something." The representative sounded uneasy. "We've seen some posts going around on social media about your family's inheritance. Do you have any comments?" My heart raced. "I'm sorry, can you tell me what exactly you've seen?" "It's a viral post claiming you kept the family's inheritance for yourself. As a partner company, we need to consider how this affects our image." I realized just how serious the situation had become. If I didn't act, my reputation and work would suffer. That night, I made a decision. I would reveal the truth. Thankfully, I'd always been meticulous. I had carefully stored every important document and record. First, I scanned and saved digital copies of Grandma's will and her letter. Next, I gathered email threads about wedding planning, receipts for flight and hotel bookings, and screenshots of Alexandra's vacation posts. The most valuable piece of evidence, however, was an audio file recorded by my grandmother. In her later years, Grandma had taken to recording important conversations, worried her memory might fade. One of those recordings captured her explanation for changing the will. "I leave my entire estate to my granddaughter Samantha, because she alone understands the true value of education and is willing to act on behalf of those in need." My daughter mocked Samantha's intentions, calling them phony charity work. "If helping others makes me a hypocrite, then I'm proud to be one." The next morning, I wrote a detailed post on my own Facebook page. "Regarding the statements circulating from my family, I'd like to share the actual facts." I laid out the timeline clearly. I included proof that I had spent $20,000 inviting my family to my wedding and that they had instead chosen to use that money for a vacation. I shared images of the will, the letter, and excerpts from the audio file. I also introduced Learning for Tomorrow and posted thank you notes from the children we'd already been able to support. At the end of the post, I wrote, "Love for family and healthy boundaries are not mutually exclusive. Even when tied by blood, I choose not to stay in relationships that only seek to exploit me. My grandmother's inheritance will be used exactly as she intended to support the future of children in need. This is my final decision." Within minutes, the responses started pouring in. The first comment came from the mother of one of the high school students we'd helped through the nonprofit. "Thanks to you, Samantha, my son didn't have to give up on his dream of going to college. We're truly grateful. I know that sometimes even family won't understand. But what you're doing is giving hope to so many others. Messages like this began to pour in from Michael's university colleagues, from my client contacts. We're glad the truth came out. We trust your integrity and everything you've built. We've seen the reports from your NPO. The results are inspiring. You have our full support. Even people from the community who had seen my mother's post began commenting. Many had already suspected something wasn't right. I remember how proud Dorothy was of Samantha. Knowing what we know now, the will makes perfect sense. I had no idea about the wedding. I was told the family just couldn't make it. This changes everything. As my post continued to spread, the narrative flipped. Criticism toward my mother and sister began to grow. What kind of mother twists the truth and paints her daughter as the villain? They used Samantha's wedding money for a vacation, and now they want the inheritance too? Shameful. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice trembled. "Samantha, please take the post down. I can't handle the way people are looking at me. You're the one who posted first. All I did was tell the truth. I didn't think it would turn into all this. Did you not think when you ruined my wedding and when you demanded the inheritance?" After a long silence, she spoke again, softly. "If I stop contacting you, will you delete it?" I answered quietly. "Honestly, Mom, that sounds like the best thing for both of us." I ended the call. Then I sat beside Michael on the couch and looked out the window, where the sky was streaked with sunset. I think this is the moment my new life truly begins. You did the right thing, Samantha. The truth always comes out. That night, I received thank you messages from children we were supporting through the NPO. They had seen my post and reached out to share how much the help meant to them. I looked at my grandmother's photo on the bookshelf and whispered, "Grandma, am I doing the right thing?" And in my heart, I could almost hear her gentle voice. "You've done well, Samantha. Now, go live your life freely and fully." From that night on, a new chapter began. The online chaos slowly faded, and learning for tomorrow found its footing. Michael and I grew even closer as we built our life together. 6 months after our wedding, we decided to move into a new home. We found a small but charming house in a quiet neighborhood, just 20 minutes from Michael's university. In the garden stood an old tree, and the neighbors told us it would bloom beautifully in spring. "Let's start our next chapter here," Michael said, as we walked through the front door. For the first time, I felt what it truly meant to build a family. During our move, Michael's parents, George and Kathy, came to help. Both were retired teachers, he in math, she in English, and still active in book clubs and tutoring programs. They were people who radiated love for education. "Samantha, this house suits you both perfectly," Kathy said, gazing out the kitchen window into the garden. "I can already picture your kids playing under that tree someday." At the time, I had no idea how soon her words would come true. 2 months later, I began noticing changes. The smell of morning coffee made me nauseous. Foods I once loved no longer appealed to me. At first, I blamed the stress of adjusting to a new home. Then I realized my period was late. I took a pregnancy test. Positive. As I sat in the bathroom, holding the test, waves of emotion swept through me: joy, anxiety, awe. When I told Michael the news, his face first showed surprise, then he gently pulled me into his arms and held me close. "Samantha, we're going to have a baby." "I'm scared, but so happy," I said. "I'm just glad our child will grow up surrounded by real love. From now on, I'll walk through life alongside my new family." I rested a hand over my stomach and thought, I will teach this child the courage to stand up for what's right and the wisdom to never harm others. Meanwhile, I filed for a restraining order against my parents and sister to protect my child and my husband. A restraining order? Against your own family? My mother had protested. But it was already too late. Without the inheritance, my parents had been forced to drain their savings and fell into debt. Alexandra got divorced and moved back in with my mother, relying on her help to raise her children. Worse, the backlash from social media had made it nearly impossible for Alexandra to find work, her past behavior now visible to anyone who searched. Their dream of a luxurious two-family home had crumbled. All that remained was debt and social isolation. Though I had severed ties with my blood relatives, I gained something far more valuable: genuine connections with people who truly cared. "Grandma, I finally found what family really means. And now, I'm about to welcome a new life into that family." As the sunset casts a warm glow over the garden, I sit wrapped in quiet happiness, reflecting on the new chapter of motherhood that is about to begin. If you don't treat me nicely, Mommy and Daddy won't help you anymore. 6-year-old Aaron stood with a sealed envelope clutched in his tiny hand, looking straight at his grandmother. He lifted the envelope slightly as he spoke. Everything stopped. Forks froze in midair. The cheerful Christmas music faded into the background like a distant echo. My mother forced a tight, confused smile, as if assuming it was a joke. But when she opened the envelope, she didn't even smile. She turned pale. Everyone rushed over to see what was inside. But I already knew. My husband Douglas and I had prepared that envelope weeks ago. We'd planned it as a last resort. And today, that day had come. It was the annual family gathering at my parents' house. Just a few hours earlier, we had still held on to a tiny hope that this year, maybe things would be different. But the moment we stepped through the front door, that hope vanished. In the living room were my sister Christina and her almost 1-year-old daughter, Madison. A massive Christmas tree stood in the corner, piled high with wrapped presents. But it was obvious nearly all of them were for Madison. None had Aaron's name on them. As soon as my mother greeted us at the door, she rushed over to Madison and said cheerfully, "Madison, Santa brought you so many presents today." To Aaron, she simply said, "Hi," barely making eye contact. The first real blow came during the family photo. "Okay, everyone, let's take a picture together," my mom called out. Naturally, Madison was placed front and center. Christina held her, flanked by our parents on either side. Aaron was shuffled to the edge, nearly cut out of the frame. "Aaron, you're blocking Madison. Step back a little," my mother instructed. I saw Aaron's face darken. Even during meal preparations, the favoritism only grew more blatant. My mother carefully heated homemade baby food for Madison and served it in a special dish. Aaron got bread and soup. "This should be enough for you. The adult food is too spicy anyway," she said dismissively. At dinner, the conversation revolved entirely around Madison. "She's turning 1 soon. She's eating solids so well, she said Mama yesterday. When Aaron tried to share something new he'd learned at school, my mother interrupted him, saying, "Hold on, look at Madison's adorable little gestures." My father added, "Madison is such a smart girl," completely ignoring Aaron's presence. What hurt even more came during snack time. "This is Madison's first Christmas cake," my mom declared, presenting a specially made mini cake just for the baby. Everyone snapped photos as Madison grabbed it with her hands, cheering, "So cute." Meanwhile, Aaron sat alone, quietly eating a plain slice of regular cake. No one looked his way. The most painful moment came during the gift exchange. My father, wearing a Santa hat, began handing out presents. "Let's start with our little angel, Madison." He beamed, giving her an expensive educational toy set, an adorable dress, and an envelope stuffed with cash for her future. Christina teared up with gratitude. "Mom, Dad, thank you," she said again and again. Then came gifts for Christina herself: baby supplies, store vouchers, and kind words. Raising a child is tough. "You're doing great." Aaron waited with a mix of hope and anxiety. Finally, it was his turn. My father handed him a small bag, clearly thrown together last minute. Inside was a cheap notebook and pencil set, probably from a dollar store. The price sticker was half peeled off. My father added flatly, "Study hard, Aaron." Aaron took the gift and whispered, "Thank you," though disappointment filled his voice. Still, at 6 years old, he knew better than to complain. He said nothing. He just sat in the corner, quietly watching as everyone doted on Madison. Douglas and I exchanged glances. From the look on his face, I knew he was thinking the same thing. This was enough. Aaron also understood the situation. He quietly pulled out the envelope we had prepared in advance. Just as my mother said, "What a lovely Christmas this was," Aaron stood up. His small back straightened with a resolve far beyond his years. More than anyone, he understood how invisible he had been made to feel. "Grandma, Grandpa," he said. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. "If you don't treat me nicely, Mommy and Daddy won't help you anymore." In that instant, the air turned to ice. My mother looked confused and asked, "What are you talking about?" My father chuckled nervously. "He's just a kid. He doesn't know what he's saying." But when Aaron handed them the envelope, the smile vanished. As they began to read the letter, my mother's face drained of color. My father, reading over her shoulder, was struck speechless. The truth was, Douglas and I had far more influence over my parents than they liked to admit. 3 years ago, my father was forced into early retirement due to health issues. Their mortgage became unmanageable. Without hesitation, we offered to help, sending them $1,500 every month. This financial support allowed them to maintain a stable life. And now, ironically, that same support had become our final card to protect our son. On the day Douglas and I sat down to plan our last resort, we knew exactly what we had to do. Douglas went to the bank to ask about halting the mortgage payments. Since the mortgage was under our name, the process was straightforward. Then, together, we drafted a letter to my parents, a letter that would serve as our final position. We chose our words carefully, not emotional but firm and precise. If you are reading this letter, it means you have once again dismissed Aaron. We believe our son has the right to feel loved and included in this family. Sadly, attempts to resolve this through conversation have failed. Unless Aaron is treated equally, we will suspend all financial support and reassess our relationship. We enclosed copies of our bank statements, 3 years of monthly transfers. $1,500 per month, totaling $18,000 per year, $54,000 over 3 years. It was not a trivial sum. Without that support, their lifestyle would drastically change. We felt conflicted about using this as leverage. But to protect Aaron, it was necessary. The most important part was to explain everything to Aaron. For a 6-year-old, the idea of changing his relationship with his grandparents was a big deal. We told him, in words he could understand. When Grandma and Grandpa don't treat you kindly, Mommy and Daddy will protect you. He looked uncertain at first, but in the end he said quietly, "I'll do my best." We sealed the letter, the transfer records, and a mortgage suspension notice in an envelope. Then we told Aaron, if you feel like they don't care about you, it's okay to give them this. And now, that moment had arrived. Aaron said softly, "I'm part of the family too, right? You love me too, don't you?" His words pierced every heart in the room. A 6-year-old should never have to question his worth to his own family. We were painfully aware of the responsibility we bore for letting it come to this. After Aaron handed over the envelope, the room fell into a heavy silence. But it didn't last. My mother suddenly stood up, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you?" She was trembled. "You're using a 6-year-old to threaten us." My father joined in, outraged. "This is blackmail. You're trying to control our behavior with money." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. "We love both our grandchildren equally. This is all in your heads." But we had had enough. Douglas stood up calmly and said, "Mother, Father, we never meant to threaten you. We just want our son to feel like he belongs in this family." I added, "If you really love him equally, then take a moment to reflect on today's gift exchange." What began as natural care for a new mother slowly morphed into something else, favoritism that never faded. Christina looked flustered. "I didn't mean it that way, okay? Madison's still just a baby." I shook my head. We waited a year hoping things would change. But they didn't. If anything, they got worse. My father burst out, "You're an ungrateful daughter. After everything we've done for you." Douglas remained composed and said, "We are grateful you raised her. That's why we've supported you all this time. But this has nothing to do with gratitude. This is about our son's dignity." The truth is, this situation began over a year ago on the day Christina gave birth to Madison. At first, we celebrated the new life together. My mother visited the hospital daily and doted on Christina. It made sense. Childbirth is tough, and mothers should support their daughters. But it didn't take long for us to realize that what was meant to be temporary special treatment had quietly become the new norm. Before Madison's birth, Aaron was always warmly welcomed. My mother used to bake his favorite cookies. My father bought him new storybooks. They asked about his school and listened with interest. For 5 years, he was cherished as their first grandchild. But everything changed after Madison arrived. The first red flag came on his birthday. For his 6th birthday, my mother gave him a tiny notebook worth maybe $5. Meanwhile, 3-month-old Madison had received an expensive baby clothing set and a piggy bank containing $100. "Babies don't really need money," I gently pointed out. My mother replied, "It's for her future," and looked at me as if I were being petty or jealous. But this wasn't just a one-time thing. Using Madison's still so little as an excuse, my parents began going out more frequently with only Christina's family. One day, Aaron had come over, hoping to go on an outing with his grandparents. Instead, he stood by the window and silently watched their car pull away. Seeing my once joyful son quietly staring at the empty driveway of the house he used to love broke my heart. The signs leading up to Christmas were already clear by Thanksgiving in November. During the annual family photo, my mother said, "Let's take a family picture," but repeatedly took shots centered on Madison, excluding Aaron altogether. The only photo with Aaron in it was one I had to beg for. Even then, Aaron appeared as a tiny figure in the corner. The disparity in gifts grew worse by the day. Every time my mother returned from shopping, she brought back new toys or clothes for Madison. Aaron? He'd be handed a pencil or notebook for school, if he got anything at all. When I said, "Could you maybe get something for Aaron too?" her excuse was always the same: "He's older now. He needs experiences, not things." What hurt the most was how Aaron began to change. He used to get excited to visit his grandparents, but gradually he stopped wanting to go. "Can I just stay home and play with you, Mommy?" he'd say. And when we brought him anyway, he would quietly read books in a corner the entire time. As a parent, I broke my heart to watch my once lively and cheerful son turn into a quiet, subdued version of himself in front of his grandparents. Over the past year, Aaron had become virtually invisible. Family gatherings were filled with talk of Madison, her first smile, her first time rolling over, her first bite of solid food. No one asked about Aaron's school, his achievement, or how he was feeling. Douglas and I knew we couldn't let this continue. The turning point came on a rainy night, after Aaron had gone to bed. Sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, we finally had the conversation we'd both been avoiding. Through tears, I told Douglas everything: how our son was being treated, the constant comparisons, the emotional neglect. Douglas listened silently. When I finished, he let out a long sigh. "I've noticed too. But they're your parents." I didn't know how to bring it up. Douglas suggested a step-by-step approach. "Let's talk to your parents directly first. If nothing changes, then we'll go with the last resort," he said. And so we began preparing a plan in case things didn't improve. This wasn't a decision we made lightly. But when we thought about Aaron's emotional health and his developing sense of self-worth, we realized we had no choice. That's how this plan came to be. We wrestled with the idea of involving Aaron. It was a heavy burden for a child. But then, one day he said to us, "I want Grandma and Grandpa to know how I feel." And with that, I knew we had to trust him. Even then, part of me hoped that day would never come. So before taking action, we tried speaking with my parents directly. I wanted to believe they might understand Aaron's feelings just a little. I called my mother and gently explained. "Aaron hasn't wanted to visit lately," I began. She dismissed it immediately. "Kids are fickle. It's normal." When I mentioned the disparities in gifts, she said, "Madison's still a baby. She needs more attention. Aaron understands, I'm sure." Talking to my father yielded the same result. "You two are overthinking it," he said. "We love both our grandchildren equally." Even as I gave concrete examples, all I got were excuses. "Well, maybe it looked that way, but it wasn't intentional." Still, I couldn't let go of the hope that, by expressing Aaron's feelings, something might change. Then today happened. Watching how they treated Aaron at the Christmas party, I finally understood they hadn't understood anything at all. When my father and Christina began arguing against the letter, Aaron squeezed my hand and asked in a small voice, "Mommy, did I say something wrong?" I held him close and whispered, "No, sweetheart. You did something incredibly brave." Hearing this, my mother exploded again. "You've brainwashed him. You're making us look like villains." The conversation went in circles. My parents kept justifying themselves. We kept laying out the facts. After nearly 30 minutes, Douglas stood and said calmly, "That's enough. We're going home." He reached for Aaron's hand and gently added, "Let's get your things." As we gathered our belongings, my mother cried out in protest, "Are you really going to cut us off? Do you know how hard that will make things for us?" But Douglas didn't even turn around. He simply replied, "Do you know how badly you've hurt Aaron?" On the way to the car, Aaron looked up at us and said, "Mommy, I'm not sad, because you and Daddy protected me." And in that moment, I knew we had made the right choice. The following weeks were, as expected, filled with turmoil. We received calls from my parents every single day. "What have you done? You're unbelievably ungrateful. Do you have any idea how much we've done for you?" My mother's voice was shaking. She was clearly crying. To use Aaron to threaten us? That's the lowest thing a parent could do. What did you put in that poor boy's head? I replied calmly, "Mom, we didn't put anything in his head. He simply expressed what he felt." But she wouldn't listen. "You brainwashed him." The next morning at 6 a.m., the phone rang again. This time it was my father. "The bank called me. Are you really cutting us off? This has to be a joke." His voice was filled with both anger and panic. "I can't cover this month's mortgage. Are you really going to leave your parents out on the street?" Douglas picked up the phone. "Father, we didn't make this decision lightly. But the damage done to Aaron's heart can't be undone. So now adults are supposed to bow to the whims of a 6-year-old. My father was shouting, but Douglas remained composed. "This isn't about whims. He's simply asking for the dignity every person deserves." Then came my mother's tearful plea. "Please, even just half of what you used to send anything." Her voice, once domineering, now sounded defeated and desperate. "Mom, this isn't about the money. It's about how Aaron is treated," I explained. She responded, Okay, I'll make sure he gets better presents next time." But I shook my head. "It's not about the presents." Her voice cracked with resignation and fatigue. "Then I don't know anymore. What am I supposed to do?" I answered gently, "Start by offering Aaron a sincere apology. And then show us through your actions that you really mean it." There was a pause. Then my mother muttered under her breath, "Apologize to a 6-year-old? That single sentence told me everything I needed to know." She still didn't understand that dignity isn't tied to age, and that when you hurt someone, you owe them an apology, no matter how old they are. So we continued withholding our financial support and decided to cut off contact with my parents, at least for the time being. 6 months after we cut them off, Christina called me with some shocking news. "Hey, things are really bad with Mom and Dad." Her voice was grave. They can't keep up with the mortgage. They've been trying to negotiate with the bank, but it's not looking good. Without the $1,500 a month we'd been sending, their financial situation had collapsed. They were trying to get by on savings and whatever my mother made from her part-time job, but it wasn't enough. Dad looks like he's aged 10 years. He flips through job listings every day, trying to find part-time work. I felt conflicted. Hearing about their struggles didn't exactly make me happy. But when I thought about the pain they had caused Aaron, I couldn't bring myself to start supporting them again, not yet. I asked, do they even understand what they did to Aaron? Christina's response came hesitantly. Well, honestly, things are tense even with Madison now. Her voice softened. Mom used to bring her new toys almost every week. Now she just says, we don't have the money. And she seems more irritated when she's taking care of her. That shocked me. The same mother who once doted on Madison endlessly was now snapping because of financial pressure. Christina sounded exhausted. She keeps saying, this is all your sister's fault, every single day. And Dad's so stressed trying to find part-time work that he's constantly on edge. The more I listened, the more I realized just how much my parents had changed. Now when Madison cries, Mom says, be quiet, and instead of worrying, she just gets irritated. She even mutters, is there something wrong with this child? Her voice trembled. She used to say Madison's cries were angelic. Now it's like she's changed completely. I've decided to start distancing myself from them too. I was stunned. Was my mother's love for Madison only possible when money was abundant? She didn't love Madison. She loved the idea of her when it was easy to love her, I said aloud. But Christina seemed to feel the same. Yeah, I think I get it now. I understand why you were so upset about Aaron. Mom and Dad's love was conditional, wasn't it? And the change in our father was just as severe. Now in his 70s, he had been applying to grocery stores and security companies for work but kept getting turned away because of his age. He says every day that he feels useless. Like he doesn't have any pride left. They're even thinking of selling the house. Christina's voice was heavy. But with the mortgage still left, selling might not even cover the debt. I didn't know what to feel. It made me question all over again whether we had truly made the right decision. But then I remembered what Douglas had said to me, words that kept me grounded. We made the best decision we could to protect Aaron's heart. Your parents' financial troubles aren't our responsibility. They're problems they need to solve on their own. Sometimes it takes hardship for people to reflect on their actions. But when that realization comes too late, the cost can be steep. And my parents were learning that the hard way. Meanwhile, we began building new family traditions. This year we spent Christmas with Douglas's parents instead. They welcomed Aaron with open arms and made sure every plan revolved around him. For the first time in a long while, he wore a smile that came from deep within. We spent New Year's just the three of us. We cooked a feast together, went on a family walk, and simply enjoyed each other's company. How about we do this again next year? I asked. Aaron beamed. Yeah, let's. Through all of this, we started to truly reflect on what family means. We learned sometimes painfully that blood ties alone don't define a family. A year has passed now, and our family looks nothing like it did before. Aaron's bravery at the age of 6 didn't just shift our relationship with his grandparents. It transformed the way our family functions at its very core. Most importantly, Aaron no longer ties his self-worth to the approval of others. He used to ride an emotional roller coaster, seeking praise from his grandparents. Now, he celebrates his own growth without needing external validation. When he brings home good grades, scores a goal in soccer, or makes a new friend, his joy is pure, untainted by anyone else's opinion. Sometimes Aaron asks, "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa are doing okay?" We answer honestly, "They're doing all right. But we're giving each other a little space right now." Then he'll say, "Maybe we'll make up one day. But it's okay, I have my family now." And in that simple sentence, I see his understanding, his acceptance. We haven't completely closed the door on reconciliation. But if that day ever comes, it will have to begin with my parents truly accepting Aaron and loving him as an equal. And more than anything, it will be Aaron's decision when and if he's ready. The greatest lesson we've learned through this experience is this: protecting your family's happiness sometimes means making painful, difficult choices. And that kind of courage isn't limited to adults. Even a 6-year-old child can stand up for what's right. Aaron's brave act opened the door to a new future for all of us. Today, our home is filled with laughter. Aaron's carefree smile, Douglas's calm warmth, and a peace in my own heart I hadn't felt in years. Maybe this sense of calm and connection is what we were searching for all along. And with the courage our 6-year-old son showed us, we'll keep moving forward together. I've decided to cancel your insurance because it's putting too much strain on our household budget. From now on, you'll have to pay for your treatment and insurance yourself. That statement pierced my heart. The living room, decorated for Christmas, was usually a warm place for family gatherings. But today was different. The moment I stepped into the house, the air felt heavy. My parents were sitting around the dining table, wearing serious expressions like they were in a business meeting. "Sit down, Natalie," Elise said. Her voice lacked its usual warmth. It was cold and businesslike. I slowly sat down, feeling the slight vibration from my continuous glucose monitor on my wrist. It was sensing my stress and warning me of a spike in blood sugar. "We need to talk about your insurance and treatment." With those words, she informed me they were canceling my insurance and would no longer pay for any of my treatments. 16 years of daily glucose checks, insulin shots, and regular visits to my endocrinologist. All of that had been my routine essential to staying alive. $600 a month in medication, $7,200 a year in insurance, plus countless medical devices and testing supplies. Without them, I would literally die. I took a deep breath and suppressed my emotions. I tried to maintain the composure I'd learned from running my business for 2 years. "Receipts matter," I replied calmly. "Exactly. I knew you'd understand," Elise said, sounding relieved. "We're really grateful that you help with the mortgage every month, but even so, your medical expenses are too much. That $7,200 insurance premium, the monthly medication, the testing supplies, the doctor's visits. Can you see how much pressure it's putting on our finances?" My heart sank. They were calling my life-sustaining expenses a burden while continuing to accept my financial help. They were telling me that what I give them for living costs is appreciated, but my medical needs cost too much. "Your father's injury at the construction site increased our medical bills too. We're struggling, Natalie." Elise continued. "You're 21 now. It's time for you to handle your own medical costs." They were gladly receiving my financial support while cutting the costs that kept me alive. "Which insurance company is it?" I asked. "Blue Cross. I called this morning and finished the cancellation. It'll end on January 1st. Elise said. Her tone was casual, as if she'd just switched phone plans. "You're running your own business and doing well. Surely you can afford your own insurance." My glucose monitor vibrated again. My blood sugar was spiking. Acute stress response. With 16 years of diabetes management, I understood what my body was doing. But this level of stress was unlike anything I'd experienced. "You do realize how much I give you every month, right?" I said quietly. "Of course," Elise replied. "The mortgage is $1,800. And we sometimes ask you to cover your father's medication. We truly appreciate it. But that's separate from your medical expenses." "Separate?" "That's right. You're helping us because we're family, aren't you? But your medical expenses are a personal cost. You're graduating from college and you're an adult now, so you should handle your own needs." My father spoke without taking his eyes off the TV. "Natty is a good girl. She'll understand. She helps us every month because she cares about her family, right?" Elise added. "Your support has really helped us, so you'll keep doing that, right?" I couldn't believe her words. They were canceling my insurance, yet expecting my financial support to continue. My life meant less to them than my money. "You understand, right, Natty?" My father finally looked away from the TV and spoke. "Honestly, is your condition really that serious? You look fine most of the time, and you're working hard. Do you really need such expensive treatment?" My glucose monitor vibrated on my wrist. "I mean," Elise continued, "you just wear that little device on your arm and give yourself injections occasionally, right? Does that really require so much money? Don't most diabetics manage it more easily?" "Natalie is exaggerating," she said firmly. "Do you really need to see an endocrinologist every 3 months? A family doctor should be enough. And you don't need to check your blood sugar 6 times a day, 2 or 3, should be fine. Do you really need that expensive sensor? The old-fashioned finger prick method should be enough." I was stunned by her words. She was calling the medical care that had kept me alive for 16 years an exaggeration. "Besides," my father added, "you don't even look sick. You're working every day and living a normal life. If you were really sick, wouldn't you look worse?" My glucose monitor was now in the danger zone. And yet, this device was one of the things they claimed was unnecessary. "You've always been practical and reasonable, so I thought you'd understand our financial situation. And thanks to your support, we've been able to make ends meet." As Elise looked at my silent face and twisted it into a convenient interpretation, I reached my limit and stood up. "Excuse me." I didn't look back as I left the house. But inside, my decision was already made. In the car, I checked my glucose monitor again. My blood sugar was still high. On the way home, a plan was already forming in my mind. First, arrange for emergency medical insurance. Then, end all financial support to my family. They had decided my medical costs were personal expenses. Now it was time for them to learn that their mortgage was being paid with personal assistance from me. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 5. From that day forward, my life was structured by a medical schedule. Blood sugar checks first thing in the morning, insulin before meals, a final check before bed. While other kids played, I was learning to manage my own survival. At the time, my parents strictly followed the doctor's instructions, carefully recorded my blood sugar logs, and always accompanied me to my endocrinology appointments. But as I grew older and learned to manage it myself, their attitude slowly began to shift. "Natalie's fine. She can handle it on her own," Elise began to say. When I got my insulin pump, my father said, "Well, that makes things easier. The machine does it now." When my blood sugar became unstable from stress, and I was trembling as I placed a glucose tablet in my mouth, "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a little drop in blood sugar. Even normal people get hungry, you know," Elise said. I tried desperately to explain. "Mom, this isn't regular hunger. When my blood sugar drops below 50, I could lose consciousness." "But you're conscious, aren't you? If it's really that dangerous, then why can you go to school like normal? Why were you able to take college entrance exams?" That logic became their new understanding. If I could live my daily life, then the illness wasn't that serious. If I could manage it myself, then it wasn't that expensive. If I looked normal, then I didn't need special consideration. They began to see 16 years of my effort: daily glucose checks, strict dietary control, regular doctor visits, responding to nighttime alarms as a normal routine. My success in self-management became the very reason they started to downplay the severity of my illness. "Don't other diabetics manage it more easily?" Elise began saying more and more. "You're just a bit too much of a perfectionist." My invisible fear, daily calculations, and constant medical vigilance looked like mere routine to them. My life-sustaining efforts had been downgraded to a habit. And now, my adult medical expenses were being dismissed as personal costs. Ironically, the more capable I became as a patient, the more they dismissed my illness. My success had become their excuse to reduce support. And then, 2 years ago, my digital marketing business began to grow rapidly as I started college. What began as a small side hustle turned into over $15,000 a month in income. But along with that success came financial requests from my family. It started when my father injured his back on a construction site. The workers' comp process was delayed, and my parents came to me, struggling with medical bills. "We're so proud of your business success. You've done amazingly well. Could you help us out a little?" With the promise it would only be for a few months, I agreed to pay for his medication. Then came the mortgage problem. His reduced work hours caused missed payments for 3 consecutive months. When the foreclosure warning arrived, they said to me, "Natalie, we need to ask a favor. Can you help us with the mortgage? We have no one else to turn to. You're our hope." I hesitated. But they were my parents, the people who raised me. "This is temporary, right?" I asked. "Of course. As soon as your dad's situation improves, we'll pay you back. You've been such a blessing, our miracle." My feelings were complicated. My business was just starting to stabilize, and $1,800 a month was a big expense for me. But at the same time, I felt guilty. These were the people who raised me. "All right," I said. "If you're in trouble, I'll help." "Thank you, Natty. You really are a wonderful daughter." But a few months turned into a year, and a year turned into 2. I tried several times to suggest cutting back the aid. But each time, guilt overwhelmed me. My parents had made sacrifices for me for years. My medical bills, special meals, frequent doctor visits. Now that they were struggling, could I really turn my back on them? "Natalie, we're so proud of you. We're truly lucky to have such a successful daughter." "But family is supposed to help each other, right?" That line from Elise pierced deeply into my heart. Family is supposed to help each other. As a member of this family, wasn't it my duty to support the others now that I had succeeded? Every time I considered refusing to help, memories haunted me. My mother holding me when I collapsed from low blood sugar. My father taking time off work to explain my insulin pump at school. They did everything for me back then. I reminded myself. Now it's my turn to do everything for them. Right now, I was successful. So continuing to help felt like the natural thing to do. I set up automatic transfers. $1,800 for the mortgage on the 15th of every month, plus occasional emergency costs. Before I realized it, I was completely supporting their lives. But their attitude toward me shifted from gratitude to entitlement. "Thank goodness we have Natalie's support" became a common phrase. To them, my success had turned into a convenient ATM. Meanwhile, their reactions to my medical expenses were the opposite. "Another doctor visit? Do you really need an endocrinologist? Isn't a family doctor good enough? Those insulin pump sensors, they cost this much every month?" My father said, looking at the bill, "Isn't there a cheaper one?" When my glucose monitor's alarm went off in the middle of the night. "That noise again? I can't sleep with it going off," they complained. I tried to explain. The severity of type 1 diabetes, the complexity of daily management, the danger of any interruption. But their reaction never changed. "But you live normally, don't you? If it's that serious, how are you running a business?" My invisible disability, the daily fears, the relentless medical control, they saw it all as luxury. Meanwhile, their mortgage was a necessity. While I was contributing over $1,800 a month, they called my $600 medication bill too expensive. While I was providing $21,600 a year, they said my $7,200 insurance premium was a burden. The math was simple. I was giving them about 3 times the amount they gave me. But what I needed to survive was a personal expense, while what they received from me to live was a family responsibility. And now, on Christmas Day, it became clear. My worth lay in my money, not in my life. It was expected that I would support their lives every month, but keeping myself alive was my personal responsibility. I made a decision. If they saw my life as a personal matter, then my support would also be a personal choice. And I had no obligation to prioritize their comfort over my own survival. That night, I opened my banking app at home. Staring at the numbers on the screen, I reflected on the past 2 years. First, I canceled the automatic mortgage payment. When the message confirming payment canceled appeared, my hands were not trembling. I was calm and resolute. I closed the joint account and removed my name from the emergency fund account. I also deactivated the credit card that had been used to pay for my father's medical expenses. In less than 30 minutes, I completely dismantled the financial support system I had built over 2 years. Then I called Dr. Evelyn Marks's office. Endocrine Associates, this is Camilla speaking. A friendly voice answered the phone. Hi, I'd like to schedule an emergency appointment with Dr. Marks. This is Natalie Henderson. My insurance was suddenly canceled. Oh no. Camilla's voice turned concerned. Let me check your file. Yes, Natalie. Your next appointment is on February 15th. Did you say your insurance was canceled? Yes. My family terminated my coverage effective January 1st. Today is December 26th. In 5 days, I'll lose access to medical care. This is serious. A type 1 diabetic going without coverage is extremely dangerous. Let me check Dr. Marks's schedule. Please hold. After 3 minutes of hold music, Camilla returned. Dr. Marks can see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. This is definitely an emergency. The next day, I sat in Dr. Marks's office, facing the endocrinologist who had treated me for 16 years. Her face was etched with deep concern. Natalie, tell me exactly what's going on. My parents canceled my health insurance to relieve financial pressure, all without prior consultation or my consent. Dr. Marks frowned. Do your parents understand the seriousness of type 1 diabetes? No, they don't, I answered. My mother said I was being dramatic, and that normal diabetics manage just fine. My father said I don't look sick, so I probably don't need expensive treatment. Unbelievable. Dr. Marks shook her head. Natalie, you've been a model patient for the past 16 years. Strict blood sugar management, regular monitoring, and ongoing care. Without those, what would happen? I knew the answer, but I needed to hear it. Without insulin, you would go into diabetic ketoacidosis within days to a week. You'd lose consciousness, fall into a coma, and without treatment, you'd die. This is not dramatic, it's medical fact. She continued. Your continuous glucose monitor has detected nighttime hypoglycemia multiple times. Without it, there's a real risk you wouldn't wake up from a dangerous low during sleep. That's a life-threatening scenario. I said honestly, but my parents decided that saving $7,200 a year in insurance premiums was more important than my life. Dr. Marks's expression hardened. Natalie, I've specialized in endocrinology for many years, and unfortunately, I've seen families cancel coverage more often than I'd like to admit. Especially for young patients who appear healthy. But this qualifies as a form of medical neglect. She looked at me for a long time. Natalie, sometimes family can be the most dangerous people in our lives, especially when they misjudge our worth. Protecting yourself from people who disregard your life isn't selfish. It's survival. You mean cutting ties? If necessary, yes. Your survival comes first, not their expectations or comfort. That day, I returned home with a medical letter, emergency insurance paperwork, and a week's worth of expensive prescriptions. But more importantly, I had validation from a medical professional that my family was endangering my life and that I had the right to protect myself. That night, I was able to feel calm for the first time in a while. My glucose levels were finally stable, my emergency prescriptions secured, and everything had returned to the proper medical routine. But something fundamental had changed. The boundary my parents crossed wasn't something that could be undone with an apology or an explanation. The phone started ringing one evening a week later. The first call was from my mother. The bank contacted us. The mortgage payment was rejected. That has to be a mistake, right? I answered the call and replied calmly. It's not a mistake. I canceled the automatic payment. Why would you do something like that? Her voice carried a note of panic. You promised to help us. We depend on you. You said my medical expenses were a personal cost I should cover myself. Your mortgage is also a personal cost. Please cover it yourselves. That's completely different. Elise shouted. The mortgage is about the house our living. That's not the same as your hospital bills. My hospital bills are what keep me alive. Don't you think that's more important than your mortgage? You're punishing us over the health insurance, aren't you? I didn't raise you to be this cruel. You're ungrateful. After everything we did to raise you, this is how you repay us? Ungrateful? I raised my voice. I supported you for 24 months, at $21,600 a year. That's $43,200 total. That's 6 times the $7,200 annual insurance premium you refused to pay. And I'm ungrateful? She was saying something, but I ended the call. Then, at 11 p.m., my father called. Natty, what's going on here? We built our life plan trusting you'd be there for us. I also built my life around trusting I had insurance. But you canceled it without warning. You're overreacting. Didn't you end up getting new coverage anyway? At 3 times the cost. After facing 4 days of medical disruption, I had to pay $800 out of pocket for emergency prescriptions. I explained. For 4 days, I lived in fear of dying. Every time the glucose monitor alarm went off at night, I wondered if it would be my last. I counted down the hours until I'd run out of insulin while waiting for emergency approval. And you call that fine? Silence. From now on, I will be stopping all financial support. Mortgage, emergency funds, everything. Just as you decided my life was a personal matter, I now consider your living costs to be your personal responsibility. Natty, that's. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked all family numbers. 3 months later, a foreclosure notice was officially issued. 5 months later, they lost the house. My father lost his job in construction, and my mother began working part-time at a fast food restaurant. They moved into a small rental apartment, and I cut off all contact with them. 1 year later, I felt at peace. Every morning, I checked my glucose monitor readings and confirmed my insulin pump was working properly. I had proper medical insurance and continued regular appointments with my endocrinologist. My health management was excellent, and my business continued to thrive. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I was shopping at the local supermarket. While I was choosing broccoli in the organic produce section, a familiar figure appeared at the corner of my vision. When I turned, I saw my mother. She looked noticeably different. The hair she once had styled regularly at a salon now looked uneven, as if she had cut it herself. Her clothes had changed from designer brands to inexpensive supermarket items. The absence of the $1,800 I had provided each month was clearly reflected in her appearance. The moment our eyes met, her expression shifted in complex ways. First surprise, then shame, and finally a flicker of hope. I tried to keep pushing my cart, but she slowly approached me. "Natalie." She spoke softly. "How have you been?" "I'm well," I replied briefly. "My health is stable." She flinched slightly, realizing I had deliberately used the word health. I could tell the memories from a year ago came flooding back to her. "I heard you bought a new house." She tried to change the subject. "Yes, it has a big yard and is perfect for running my business from home," I answered, making it clear that my financial situation remained stable. That's wonderful. Really wonderful," she said. Her voice carried mixed emotions. We stood in an awkward silence. "Listen, Natalie," my mother finally said. "We understand now about your diabetes, how truly important and necessary it is for you." "Do you?" I replied without emotion. "We were wrong. We made a terrible mistake." Tears were welling in her eyes. "Even though you were supporting us every month, we tried to cut the medical costs that were keeping you alive. What a thankless thing we did." I stared at her. This was the woman who raised me. She taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with homework, and nursed me when I was sick. But she was also the woman who, while receiving $21,600 a year from me, said that my $7,200 annual insurance premium was too much of a burden. "Is there any way?" she asked pleadingly. "Any way to fix this? We're really struggling. We lost the house. Your father lost his job. We've realized we can't live without your help. We were so foolish. We didn't understand how much you were supporting us or how important your medical care really is." I took a deep breath. "What you understand is the consequences, not my feelings." "What do you mean?" "You're apologizing because you're suffering financially. Not because I suffered, but because you did." She tried to respond, but I continued. "If I had found a new insurance plan easily, without any hardship, and if you had managed to live without my help, would you have apologized?" My mother fell silent. We both knew the answer. "What you've learned is the value of my support, not the value of my life." She looked confused. "To you, my worth was my money, not my life. Whether I lived or died didn't matter. What mattered was whether I kept providing money." "That's not true." She began to cry. "Whether or not you've really changed will be shown by time, not by words, but by actions, and by whether you've learned how to live without me." "How much time will that take?" she asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But start by finding solutions on your own instead of asking me for help. I'll learn to recognize my value beyond my money." I began to push my cart forward. Goodbye. On the way home, I was filled with complex emotions. The anger had mostly faded. What remained was a deep sadness and a small glimmer of hope. She did seem to be genuinely hurting. But I couldn't tell if it was regret born from love or despair, caused by financial hardship. When I got home, I checked my glucose monitor. The numbers were within normal range. Despite today's emotional encounter, my blood sugar was steady. With proper medical care, I could stay healthy even under stress. That was what I had fought for. That was what had been worth protecting. 2 months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten by my mother. Dear Natalie, I've thought about your words over and over. You were right. We treated your support as something we were entitled to. We valued your money and overlooked your worth. I started working 2 jobs. Kenneth has found employment too. We're trying to live on our own. It's not easy, but we understand now that we must do this without you. One day, if you ever choose to forgive us, I hope we can rebuild our relationship not on money, but on love. With love. Mom. P.S. I've been studying type 1 diabetes at the library. I'm beginning to understand just how strong you are. I read that letter again and again. I have no intention of resuming financial support. But perhaps the relationship, as human beings, can be rebuilt. A new relationship, one based on mutual respect and understanding. My health and my boundaries come first, and my family is beginning to accept that. Maintaining boundaries can be a form of educating those we love. And sometimes, the harshest lessons lead to the most valuable growth. They lost their financial stability because they dismissed the value of my life. But in doing so, they gained the most important lesson: what I'm truly worth and how deeply their actions matter. Today, my glucose monitor shows perfect numbers. My health is steady. My business is thriving. And my boundaries are intact,